Good morning, everyone. Hello. I am so sorry about the technical difficulties, but thank you for making it here. Good morning. I am Lauren Cadillac, aka OG Cadillac, aka Mother of the Decade, aka looks a decade younger than she really is. What a week. What a week. What a week of trial. Goodness gracious, y'all. Oh. Unbelievable. An unbelievable sequence of events has occurred. I swear to God. This has been the most cliffhanging trial I have ever watched. It's wild. I mean, this trial reads like a television show. This trial will be a television show. And Netflix, call me. I'm happy to be on the documentary. Morning, everyone. Hey, K-Way. Good morning. Inye, good to see you. Tall Glass, Hippieista, Tatum, everyone. Wow. What a flippin' week, y'all. Okay, so, as you all recall, we were left on Friday with a cliffhanger of will the judge give a mistrial? And she said she would, right? She said on Friday, was it Friday or Thursday, whatever day it was that calamity occurred. She said, if you want a mistrial, I'll give it to you. As you recall, the two people that were most affected by the witness, whose name I don't remember, Slime Life something, I don't know. Anyhow, the two people that were most affected by his statement or his reading of what should have been redacted were the two Quas. I love how the judge called them Qua. So I'm carrying on the tradition, okay? The two Quas, who it turns out were also facing some of the most serious time regarding the crimes that they were charged with. So the two Quas, in my opinion, had the best bargaining chip. And we for surely saw that. We saw them play that hand. Okay? So, I think all of my viewers would agree with me and believe me when they say that the defense and everyone believes that the defense is/was winning the trial. Okay? All of us believe that, 100%. But when you're either of the Quays, you have to look at, yes, it appears I'm winning at this trial, but has all of my evidence been presented? Can I get a situation where I know I'm facing time? It's not like these are ultra innocent men, it's not like they're in here. Slime Life Shoddy, that's the guy who said it. So it's not like these men are in here just, the most upstanding citizens. And Thug, whose plea we'll get to later, he, the majority of his crimes were when he was arrested. They found all this drugs and shit on him. So you, as a defendant, have to, weigh, right? It's always 50-50 in the courtroom. It's us against them. In a defense or in a criminal courtroom, typically you're going to be weighted a little more heavily. But it was a lot of years. It was a lot of years. It was several lifetimes. So the it looks like my internet just zapped out. Ooh. Okay, so Huey, the Quay that is Huey, was facing something like 3 lifetimes and 100 years, right? So when you are looking at, should I take a plea? One thing that should come into consideration is, did I do it or not? Okay. But then certainly you want to think about, like, even if I didn't do it, I'm facing, how many years of potential sentencing, how much longer with the trial. I don't know, this 3 months came out, like, oh, it's going to be 3 more months of trial, and I'm like, where? Because it looks like 8 more years to me. I don't see any presentation getting any better or more streamlined. So I think the trial, the length of the trial, the fact that they're currently incarcerated, there are going to be so many factors that you're going to take into consideration and weigh. Money is a factor you need to take in consideration and weigh in determining, do I want to take a plea or not? Okay, so all of the pleas, as far as I'm concerned, have been very good for the defendants. When you weigh the plea, the result of the plea versus what they were facing, what they could potentially serve, then these guys got good deal. Good, as Ifani knew she was losing. We're going to put it that way. All right, so Monday, nothing happened, right? And then it was Tuesday, I believe, that we get Mr. Nichols. So we're going to watch this together at 1.75. Here we go.
All right, I apologize for the interruption. Thanks for y'all's patience. Some of the co-defendants in the ongoing trial wanted to be out here, so they are out here now. And Mr. Harvey, are we ready with Mr. Nichols?
Yes.
All right.
Do you want him at the podium or do you want him?
Okay, so that's a spider jacket. I do not like that jacket. I do not like the... It's very Halloween-esque to me. It's not like an adult jacket as far as I'm concerned.
You're seated.
I think at the podium, please. Thank you.
Here comes Qua. I loved it when Whitaker called him Qua. He's in my daughter's favorite kind of pants, cargo. My daughter loves cargo pants. Her and Qua dress alike.
Now let's have him at the podium because he's going to have to take an active part in this entry. All right.
Okay, sure.
An active part, okay.
Sergeant, can you swear him in, please?
Raise your right hand. So I just want to get that.
Yes.
All right. State spell your first last name for course.
Okay, now, one thing that is very distinctive to me is the way the Quas speak and answer the questions versus the way Thug did and Jeffrey Williams, okay? And listen to him. He says, yesh, and like kind of talks under, he mumbles quite a bit. When Jeffrey talks a few days later, he is speaking much more clearly than that. I can only imagine that you can chalk that up to having traveled and having kind of a greater exposure to other cultures versus maybe not. I'm thinking maybe Mr. Nichols isn't as well traveled as Young Thug.
Quamar Nichols, Quamarvius, last name Nichols, Nichols.
All right. Okay. Do you want to do it again? All right. Slow down. Your name. Spell it for this young lady right here.
Okay, my name is Quamar Nichols. First name Quamarvius. My last name Nichols, Nichols.
And Mr. Nichols, are you the same person referred to as Quamar Nichols on indictment 22 SC 183572?
Yes.
And are you at this time taking or under the influence of any alcohol, drugs, or medicine?
No.
Have you had the opportunity to sign this indictment?
I feel like the answer to that should be I wish. I wish I was, ma'am. But no, I'm sober.
Sign this indictment with your attorney, Mr. Marquavius.
Yes.
How old are you?
29.
And how far did you go in school?
I got my GED.
I did not hear you.
I got my GED.
Are you able to read, write, and understand the English language?
Yes.
Do you understand that in this indictment, you were initially charged with count 1, conspiracy to violate the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, which carries a sentence of 5 to 20 years. You were also charged with count 49 in this indictment, which is murder, which carries a sentence of life. You were charged with 2 counts of participation in criminal street gang activity, which was counts 50 and 51, which each carried a sentence of 5 to 20 years. You were initially charged with counts 53 and 65, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon under Code Section 16-11-133, which each carried a sentence of 15 years consecutive to count 1. And then you also charged with count 54, which is possession of a firearm during commission of a felony, which carries a sentence of 5 years consecutive to count 1. Do you understand that's what you were initially charged with?
Yes.
Do you understand that you have the right to plead either guilty or not guilty to these charges? And if you plead not guilty or remain silent, you may receive a jury trial.
Yes.
Have you had an opportunity to go over and review the waiver of rights form with your attorney?
Yes.
And I'm going to hand this to your attorney. Did you sign Have you had enough time to speak with your attorney, Mr. Bruce Harvey, about all the facts and circumstances known to you regarding charges in this indictment?
Yes.
Do you need any more time to discuss this man with your attorney?
No.
Are you satisfied with his counsel representation?
Yes.
And
And they are all attorneys of record and have participated in this particular proceeding and negotiations leading up to this proceeding.
Thank you.
Do you waive formal reading of the indictment?
Yes.
Do you waive any and all defects with respect to the indictment?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, have you been arrested on all the charges in this indictment?
Yes.
And Mr. Harvey, the state's unaware of any outstanding warrants related to these charges. Do you know?
Okay, so just all this crap is the stuff that's required by law after years of litigation, you know, people taking pleas and maybe not understanding. It goes up through appeals court, Supreme Court. They must now always repeat all this crap. Do you understand this? Do you understand that? Do you read? Do you write? So this is very like...
any outcome and maximum sentence, which means that the state will recommend to the court as to count 1, conspiracy to violate the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, a sentence of 20 years to serve 7 years in custody, balanced on probation.
Yes.
Do you understand as a part of the negotiated agreement, the state will null, proc, or dismiss count 49, which is the murder count, count 50, 51, which are the gang activity counts, count 53, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon.
They dropped the murder charge. The state is doing so poorly that they dropped the grandest and most violent charge of them all.
Count 54, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and count 65, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon. Do you understand that is a negotiated agreement?
Yes.
Do you understand the court does not have to accept that recommendation?
Yes.
And the court can sentence you to the maximum on each charge and can run those charges consecutively or one after the other?
Yes.
Well, there's only one charge that a guilty plea is being entered into, so
Under my breath today.
there's no other sentence to run anything consecutively with regard to this plea. You understand that?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you understand this plea may be used to enhance sentencing on other convictions in this jurisdiction as well as in other jurisdictions, including the federal courts?
Yes.
Do you understand if you are currently on probation or parole, your probation or parole may be revoked based on your entering a guilty plea today?
Yes.
Do you understand if you're placed on probation of any kind, you cannot violate any criminal laws of any governmental unit or any special conditions of probation without being subject to revocation for the balance of your sentence?
Yes.
Do you understand you are not allowed to possess or use a firearm while on probation?
Yes.
Do you understand if you are not a United States citizen, a guilty plea conviction will affect your immigration status and will result in deportation, just like a conviction at a trial would, and that is true regardless of any advice by your attorney or anyone else?
Yes.
Do you understand that neither the court, your attorney, nor the district attorney's office has anything to do with parole, the Department of Corrections, or Board of Pardons and Paroles, and no one can guarantee parole no matter what anyone has told you from a conviction, your right to obtain a pass appeal, the right of witnesses called to testify yourself,
Yes.
the right to confront witnesses and confront these rights and enter a guilty plea because you're in fact guilty.
Yes.
With respect to indictment 22 SC 183-572, how do you plead to count 1, conspiracy to violate the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act?
Yes.
Is this guilty plea freely and voluntarily given with a full knowledge of the charge against you?
Yes.
Do you understand that you have only a limited right to appeal this guilty plea conviction?
Yes.
Do you understand that you have 4 years from today's date to file a habeas corpus petition challenging the voluntary?
Okay, so he took a guilty plea on the RICO charge.
Yes.
And Your Honor, in this case, we're to
Hang on just a second. You also have, so 4 years for that to file a direct appeal. You have 30 days from the date of sentencing, which is going to be today. And you have until the end of this term of court to file a motion seeking to withdraw your guilty plea. That doesn't mean anything like that would be granted. You would have to establish facts that would warrant that. That's just the time period is until the end of this term of court. Do you understand that as well?
Yes.
All right.
Your Honor, if this case were to continue with trial, Your Honor, the state would expect, as this defendant, the state would expect to show that what has already come into evidence that on
Miss Love, just look at her. Look at Adrienne Love just sitting there with her crooked ass computer, wiggling her head, always has something to say. I swear to Christ, the fact that Hylton, I almost called her Nikki Hylton, Simone Hylton, aka Saint Nikki Hylton, patron saint of courtroom patience. The fact that woman has not Love upside the head, I swear to Christ, she deserves a cookie. Send Nikki Hylton some damn Tiff's treats, y'all. Swear to God. During the plea, Love is being this way. During the plea. I'm sorry. I just thought about having to work with someone like that, and it made me like physically want to murder her. Physically, like, okay, we will continue.
July 3rd, 2017, as well as October 23rd, 2018, that this defendant is an associate.
Neither of these lawyers is getting fired, just so you know. They're going to be celebrated. Fonnie's office is going to consider this a win. They are. They're going to celebrate this. This is going to end up in, like, their monthly newsletter that I told you Belinda found and was, like, the Fonnie Willis newsletter. So, no, these women are going to be celebrated. And that is how you continue to foster a culture of lying. That is how you foster a culture of fraud, in a culture of just putting people in jail because you can. Trust me, these women are going to be applauded in Fonnie's office.
Associate of the enterprise of illegal activity to preserving, protecting from violence that this defendant preserved, protect, and enhance the reputation to the enterprise. And within team, Mr. Nichols was located at 2612 Steele Avenue, which is in the Cleveland Avenue sector of the city. Your Honor, they found marijuana as well as sandwich baggies that were used to package drugs.
Not sandwich baggies. What?
And there are also guns found inside of that vehicle. Also in July of 2017, this defendant was stopped during a traffic stop in the Cascade area, Your Honor. After being stopped, Your Honor, there was a consensual search of the vehicle that yielded powder MDMA, Xanax, as well as a loaded gun inside of that vehicle. Additionally, Your Honor, in July 2019, it was entitled Slam Above the Law. We know from the evidence that slime is one of the terminology used by members of YSL to refer to. Your Honor, Mr. Nichols was found in surveillance video at a gas station at Windsor Thomas and carried on into 2020 in public at the early part of March 2022 around Curry. Mr. Stillwell was still in his vehicle, which was Audi. At some point in time, Mr. Nichols got
even having it at 1.75 is too much.
And Mr. Nichols got that both in the
RICO conspiracy required elements with regard to the July 3rd, 2017 drug event, the October 23rd, 2018 drug event. We categorically deny and contest any use of violence by Mr. Nichols. We don't agree to the underlying factual basis. We believe those two predicate acts that were committed by Mr. Nichols without any question are sufficient to meet the elements of the offense. The offense to which he's pleaded to, which is a RICO conspiracy. A RICO conspiracy requires proof that the defendant either conspire with another person to violate one of the substantive provisions of RICO, and that would be drug offenses, or personally endeavor, I believe that's what the language of the statute says, to violate one of the substantive provisions.
Well, that's what the language of the statute says, but
Yes.
he is indicted in this indictment with conspiring, not with endeavoring.
That's correct. So we're talking about a conspiracy. We acknowledge the two events that he participated in. We categorically deny any other allegations other than those two events that are sufficient for a factual basis. We categorically deny that we participated in.
Okay. So obviously this is happening and Thug hasn't taken his plea yet. So while Nichols is taking his plea, it is still a concern that the government is going to try to use those pleas, and these are facts, against the remaining defendants. Additionally, these records, like the discussion here in the sentencing, can be used later against, these defendants if they find out, they end up in another criminal situation, right? So Harvey is like preserving the record. We do not agree to the facts. We vehemently disagree to this. We believe these two things can be proven, and since these two things are the required elements, that is the only reason we're taking this plea. So he is making it very distinct. He's making a distinction very clearly that none of the facts are being accepted. There are two facts that are being accepted. He had drugs and he had a friend that he had drugs with. That's it. Morning, another CG.
In any way, in the unfortunate death of Mr. Drinks, we categorically deny any other charges to which we are, substantive charges to which we are not entering a plea, and that includes gang charges. This is a plea solely to a conspiracy to violate.
Y'all, Miss Love and her fucking fidgety. I swear to Christ. I swear to God. You know those things where you get a package and you open it and like a bag of dicks comes out or something? We need to send that we need to send that to Miss Love.
The RICO Act. But yes, we acknowledge a factual basis to that extent, Your Honor.
Understood. All right, thank you.
Your Honor, I just have one additional thing to say.
Go ahead.
The factual basis regarding the nature of YSL is that the evidence has shown and will continue to show that Mr. Nichols conspired with others to participate in Young Slime Life through a pattern of racketeering activity, and multiple defendants and unindicted co-conspirators have committed overt acts to further this dominance of.
I foresee is proof that the defendant conspired with another person to violate one of the substantive provisions of RICO, and that is subsumed by the drug offenses that have already been proven in this case, and to which Mr. Nichols has previously pled.
All right, thank you. Understood.
And Your Honor, I approach with a waiver of rights for him.
Yes. Waiver of rights.
Plea colloquy has been acknowledged and gone over personally with Mr. Nichols.
All right. And Mr. Nichols, have you had sufficient time to consider this guilty plea that has been negotiated between the state and your attorneys and to discuss anything you wanted to about that with your attorneys?
Yes.
All right. And you understand, I hope, I'm going to ask you, that it is your decision ultimately, obviously with the advice of your attorneys, but it's ultimately up to you individually to decide whether you want to enter this guilty plea or not. Do you understand that?
Yes.
All right. And you do want to enter this guilty plea?
Yes.
All right. And Mr. Harvey, have you advised Mr. Nichols of the alternatives if he does not ultimately go through with his guilty plea and the potential benefits and drawbacks of all of the other options?
Yes,
All right.
very thoroughly, Judge.
All right.
And I'm sure that's true.
All right,
I'm
Mr.
sure it's
Harvey, is
very
there
thorough.
anything that the defense wants to add to the record?
Judge, other than the statement with regard to the underlying factual basis, I would point out for the court that when Mr. Nichols filled out his form, it says 29 plus. He is a birthday boy in a couple of days and he will be 30. And at 30 years of age, he has a wife, he has got a 13-year-old daughter, he's got a 10-year-old daughter, and an 8-year-old son. His wife and sister, I believe, are here in the courtroom to support him. He, Mr. Nichols, was born and raised in Atlanta, and we're at this point before I have even given my opening statement in this case.
Yes, sir.
I do.
Okay, so why that's important is it's showing cooperation, right? We're not even fighting to the point that I've even done my opening statement, right? Like, we've only had this state begin their presentation.
I want the court to know that Mr. Nichols' mother died in prison. His father was shot by the Atlanta police when he was 4
Wait, did his mom die in prison, or did his mom die while he was in prison? I'm very confused by that sentence.
years old. And he was raised by friends and family in the Atlanta area. So he has come to this point in his life from a very humble
So his mother was in prison. Okay.
beginning. And he has sought the support of friends in this courtroom and others in this courtroom. He is an intelligent young man who I believe has a future. Every day we do a word of the day. We put a new word into a sentence. And I think this is in his best interest. I know that there is, and I know this plea is negotiated, but it's a long downside from 7 to 20. So the courts will have jurisdiction over him for a period of time. So I
Wow,
ask the
he's
court.
left-handed. Bruce Harvey's left-handed, y'all. Which means that if he was my friend, I would tease him relentlessly. Oh my gosh, I would tease him relentlessly.
Given who this young man is, and given our categorical denial of some of the factual basis, to accept the plea and sentence Mr. Nichols accordingly.
Ms. Nichols, is there anything that you want to say?
No, ma'am.
All right. All right, I find there to be a factual basis for the guilty plea to role or interest in money and personal property through a pattern of racketeering activity. And that is the only count that guilty plea is being entered for. The remaining counts of this indictment as against Mr. Nichols are being null pros by the state as a part of this indictment. I find, having heard the evidence up to the point of trial right now, that there is evidence of at least one overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy, and that there is evidence that would fall within the required statute of limitations to establish this RICO conspiracy count. One of the things that we as judges are instructed by our Uniform Superior Court rules to do when we are considering whether to accept a guilty plea and whether to accept a negotiated sentence, and this is a negotiated sentence in this case, is to take into account whether giving leniency in sentencing is going to aid in ensuring promptness and certainty, or at least more promptness and more certainty with regard to corrective measures, whether the defendant, and in this case the defendant has acknowledged guilt and is accepting responsibility for his guilt of the RICO count, and whether accepting the plea will aid in avoiding further delays, not just with regard to this case, but with regard to the entirety of our system here in Fulton County. And this plea does go towards doing all of those things. I am going to accept the plea as negotiated and sentence in accord with the negotiated recommendation.
Okay.
As I said before, find there to be a factual basis for count one of the plea. I find the plea to have...
Okay, so Harvey negotiated that plea for the first qua. All right, and the judge, she went along with it. She was cool. Okay. Dude was, charged with murder. So he had a lot to kind of weigh, a lot of consequences to look at. Oh shit, I forgot about Lil Rod. Damn. Okay. So the next morning, we wake up, and I guess it was in the afternoon, and Lil Rod has negotiated a plea. I have been very impressed, by the way, with his attorneys And if I ever needed an attorney in Atlanta, I would call them. They're great. They did great.
Sergeant Ingram, can you swear Mr. Ryan in?
Yes, sir. Rodalius Ryan, R-O-D-A-L-I-U-S, Ryan, R-Y-A-N.
And Mr. Ryan, are you the same person referred to as Rodalius Ryan on indictment number 22SC183572?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you at this time under the influence of any alcohol, drugs, or medicine?
No, ma'am.
How old are you?
Currently 20 years old.
And how far did you go to school?
12th grade.
Are you able to read, write, and understand the English language?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you understand that you are charged in this indictment with count 1, conspiracy to violate the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organization Act, which carries a sentence of 5 to 20 years?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you understand that you have the right to plead either guilty or not guilty to these charges?
Yes, ma'am.
And if you plead not guilty or remain silent, you may receive a jury trial.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you had an opportunity to go over this plea of guilty and waiver of rights form with your attorney?
Yes, ma'am.
And have you and your attorney both reviewed it and you signed this document?
Yes, ma'am. My signature.
That's your signature?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you had enough time to speak with your attorney, Ms. Leah Abbasi, about all the facts and circumstances known to you regarding charges in this indictment?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you been able to speak with her about any potential defenses?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you need any more time to discuss this case with your attorney?
No.
Are you satisfied with her counsel and representation?
Yes, ma'am.
You also had another attorney, Ms. Angela D. Williams. Are you satisfied with her counsel and representation?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you waive formal reading of the indictment?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you waive any defects, if any, with respect to the indictment?
No, ma'am. Can you repeat that for me?
Sure. Do you waive any and all defects in the indictment? If-
Yes.
And have you been arrested on these charges, specifically count 1, the conspiracy to violate the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organization Act?
He was already in custody, so he was not taken into custody for these charges. However, he was booked for the charges in the Fulton County Jail.
And he was served with the arrest warrant on this?
Yes.
Has Ms. Abbasi advised you of the minimum and maximum sentence for the charges you are pleading to?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you understand this is a negotiated plea of guilty, which means that the state will recommend to the court a sentence of 10 years to serve, commuted to the time you have served in this case? Do you understand that?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you understand that this sentence should run concurrently with the sentence that you are already serving for 19 SC 168236? Do you understand that?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you understand that the court does not have to accept this recommendation?
Yes, ma'am.
And the court can sentence you to the maximum on this charge?
I understand.
Do you understand that this plea may be used in enhanced sentencing on other convictions in this jurisdiction as well as other jurisdictions, including the federal courts?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you understand that you are not
Sorry, one
indicted?
moment. Please repeat the question.
Okay.
Do you want to again finish the sentence? That one.
Plea today.
Yes, ma'am.
And you also understand that you have until the end of this term of court to file a motion.
They would be the ones to file those for you, okay?
No.
All right, Ms. Abbasi, is there anything that the defense wants to add to the record?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor, I have had the honor really of representing Mr. Ryan along with Ms. D. Williams, who I'm quite disappointed she could not be here today for an important day. This trial has been exhausting for everybody, and that certainly includes Mr. Ryan, who...
I love that she said that. First, Misty Williams should be there, really, because she's been there. She's been there. But also, it's been exhausting for everyone. It's a very good point, ma'am.
has been going through the court system since he was 15 years old. We categorically and adamantly deny that YSL is the criminal, dangerous street gang which it's been made out to be through this trial. We're actually quite happy with the record which was established during the presentation of the state's evidence of the alleged murder of Mr. Jamari Holmes.
Bet they are. Bet they are, because they destroyed that murder. So if his appeal runs up and they have another trial on that murder against Rod, oh my goodness, they have this record to use. Good luck. Good luck.
This plea today, Mr. Ryan is making a decision which is going to be the best for his future, what future he has, because he's already serving a life sentence. Were he to be convicted and sentenced to additional time, he would remain in custody. As I stated, we think the record established will strongly support his appeal, and hopefully, when conviction is overturned, we don't want him sitting in prison for something else. Certainly not for actions he took when he was younger, and actions he took which are largely a product of how he grew up. As I stated, Your Honor, Mr. Ryan was 15 years old at the time of the Jamari Holmes murder. You've seen through the text messages, he was out at all different hours, doing all different things, which I don't think anyone would want their 15-year-old to be out doing. And so that is where he was, and so he did adopt the people who were around him, the people who could support him, the people in his neighborhood who grouped themselves, calling themselves YSL. Mr. Ryan at no point was trying to advance a criminal street gang in their interests. He was trying to protect himself, being a young person, largely on his own, and this is where he's ended up. I would like to say that there's been some sort of rehabilitative function here since he was sentenced to prison. It doesn't appear that that has happened. As you've heard, some of his additional cases are within the prison system. It would be wonderful if some of the money spent on a case like this could possibly be invested in the future of people like Mr. Ryan, who go into custody at such a young age, and who really then are not given the resources to make the changes that they really would like to make to have a productive future.
You damn right it is. It would be a much better use of our tax dollars, of my money, of your money, to help rehabilitate young folks than just throw them in jail and make them fucking career criminals. Good morning, Ayana. Good morning, everyone. Thanks, everyone who's joining. Thank you. Welcome.
With all of that said, I think Mr. Ryan has grown up a lot during this trial. He doesn't want to sit through this anymore. He doesn't want to ever be back in a courtroom ever again, Your Honor. He's heard about all sorts of incidents, which the 2015 crimes, he was 11 years old. Mr. Ryan's most sincere wish is to move on with his life, to put this behind him. And we thank the court for the opportunity to resolve the case in this way and not drag it out any further than it has been.
All right.
He just would like to thank the court, Judge.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Ryan, I just want to make sure that you understand that this is ultimately, the decision is yours to make, not your attorneys, and I appreciate that Ms. Abbasi and Ms. Williams have been available in giving you legal advice and guidance, but it's ultimately your decision. Do you understand that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and do you, in fact, want to plead guilty?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and you've had enough time to think about it and to discuss it with your attorneys?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And Ms. Abbasi, have you and or Ms. Williams talked to Mr. Ryan about the benefits and drawbacks of all of his different options?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. All right. I find that there is a factual basis for the guilty plea to count 1, the conspiracy to violate the RICO Act, bill is or isn't, and what Mr. Ryan may or may not have intended. There is a factual basis that exists from the record, as it already is in this case, to support the necessary elements of the conspiracy to violate the RICO Act. And I have heard many of the alleged overt acts and the conspiracy evidence to advance the enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity and to control personal property and money, and I find that the factual basis for that exists, and I'm going to accept Mr. Ryan's guilty plea. I find it to be freely, knowingly, intelligently, and voluntarily entered with an understanding of the consequences of this plea, and I'm going to sentence in accord with the recommendation that both of the state and the defense have worked hard to negotiate here, which is a sentence of 10 years commuted to time served and to be run concurrently with the sentence that Mr. Ryan is currently serving, and certainly within the court's consideration is the knowledge that Mr. Ryan is at this time serving a life sentence for the murder of Mr. Holmes, and while I understand that that is on appeal right now, you know, those are the facts as they exist.
So he got 10 years commuted to time served, which means that if his appeal is successful, he is a free man. He is a free man. He's on probation and, you know, all that shit, but he's out from behind bars. This is a fabulous plea deal. This is a fantastic plea arranged by the state. I mean, by Ms. Abbasi and Ms. D. Williams. I swear, all of these pleas are so good for the defendant. That just shows me how fucked Fonnie knew she was. That shows me that she knew that, you know, like, they're losing. Fonnie knows they're losing. Miss Love probably knows they're losing. She doesn't want to admit it. Okay, then we get YSL Silver Fox up here.
I wanted to be clear that on counts 6 and 19, which are possession of...
Deny all of the recitation that's been presented by the court with respect to some of these allegations that's been laid out by the state. However, we do recognize that there are enough factual allegations in the recitation to support each and every count to which Mr. Huey is pleading this afternoon. So we do stipulate that there is enough to move forward with this plea. For those reasons, Your Honor, we are standing before this court to talk to this court about the acceptance of responsibility with respect to Mr. Marquavius Huey. Your Honor, Mr. Marquavius Huey was born in Atlanta, Georgia. He lived in the Jonesboro South.
Oh no, he's Marquavius. Okay, I was like, oh, he is no.
Community
Project,
project,
okay.
a neighborhood project in Atlanta community. He grew up there. He's seen a lot of things in his short 28-year life. His father was murdered in 2010, and he's been without a father for a number of years. He's been raised by his mother as a single parent. He has a number of siblings. There have been times when Mr. Huey and his mother and his family have been homeless and have lived out of a car. So he's had a very hard life as it relates to his upbringing. Notwithstanding that, Your Honor, he did manage to graduate from high school. Mr. Huey, Your Honor, now has 2 children. He's 28 years old. He has 2 children. He has a 5-year-old son, Your Honor. He has a 2-year-old little daughter that was born in July of 2022. He has never met or seen his daughter in person until today, as she's here in this courtroom.
What? That is so freaking sad. Also, welcome, Nene, to Paralegal. I thought you were already a member, but welcome to the membership. Next year, y'all, be on the lookout. We're going to have a lot of new things to do with the membership, okay? We'll have more levels and fun stuff, okay? All right, so here's Huey, Marquavius Huey, the other Quay, who hasn't met his child or seen her until today. It's now a 2-year-old. That's crazy. It's so sad.
He recognizes that choices puts him before this court in this case. Your Honor, we are asking this court to take into consideration that he has no prior felony convictions. I've had a very long time to get to know Mr. Huey because I've been with Mr. Huey on a regular, daily basis during the week since January of 2023. I've got a chance to know him. I've got a chance to work with him on his case regularly. And he wants to, when he gets out of custody, Your Honor, he wants to do a number of things, 2 in particular. He wants to start and become affiliated with a nonprofit organization where he can be able to talk to young children. He has approximately 4
Shelly, I did notice they all have a lot of, or many of them have a lot of kids, and that makes a lot of sense. Birth control options are not readily available in many, many, many communities, particularly poor communities. It's kind of like one of the way that the man keeps us down, so to speak, is make sure that women have children that they, maybe can't necessarily afford to keep up with, and then put us in jail if we try to leave our kid with a babysitter for too long, or have the kid at the park while we're working at McDonald's because nobody helps pay for childcare, and we're not allowed to use birth control. I mean, we see it. And this is the result. This is what they wanted, and they are getting it. These are our policies, 4
years under his belt against that 9-year sentence, and that 9-year sentence is parolable. So we're going to enter that as an exhibit before the court.
All right, that'll be Defendants Exhibit 1 to this plea hearing, and as you know, and as I'm sure you have shared with Mr. Huey, it's ultimately the Department of Corrections that calculates the...
Thank you, Justice Jr., who also would like to address the court at this time, Your Honor. So we're asking this court to accept the negotiation that has been represented to the court, and Mr. C.J. Matthews.
Yes, good afternoon to this honorable
Good
court.
afternoon, Mr. Matthews.
Okay, so finally we get to hear Matthews Jr.'s voice, and I am really sad. Oh, Susan and No Face. It's not allowed. It's just access, money. Birth control's really expensive. Last time I checked. I guess maybe under Obamacare, it's I don't know. It's hard to get, man. And in these communities in Georgia, that's the state where they don't want women to make choices about their bodies. So they kind of shut down the facilities that give us the care we need. All right, so I'm not going to go off on that political tangent about women, but do think about that while you're voting on Tuesday. I was shocked to hear Carrington Matthews Jr. speak. I thought that he would be speaking very much like his father, like a lawyer, super. But listen to this.
I've been gracious with this opportunity to represent and serve Mr. Huey. Mr. Huey is an honorable young man. Mr. Huey does not allow his mistakes to define him, but he is remorseful, Your Honor. He has learned, grown, and became a better man during this trial. Mr. Huey will have a release date, Your Honor, and I'm confident in him that he'll be a working-class citizen in society when he is released. We thank this honorable court and respectfully ask this court to accept this plea on today.
All right, thank you, Mr. Matthews. Mr. Huey, I am sure that Mr. Matthews Sr. and Mr. Matthews Jr.
Do you see how I guess maybe his dad doesn't let him talk a lot in the courtroom? I don't know.
I know that they have been working with you and negotiating with the state for a week and a couple of days to get where we are right now. And I know that you know that given the severity and the number of charges that you were facing, that had you been convicted of all of those charges at trial, you were looking at the possibility of 3 consecutive life sentences, plus I think about 100 years after that. So the fact that the state...
Okay, 3 life sentences plus 100 years. 3 life sentences plus 100 years. That's 4 life sentences.
Is recommending jointly with your attorneys that your total sentence be 25 years with 9 of those to serve is, it's frankly remarkable and something that you should not take for granted or take lightly at all. These are very serious charges.
She said, your lawyer got you from 3 life sentences plus 100 years to 9 years behind bars. They went 3 life sentences. Let's say his life is 100 years, because I'm bad at math. 1, 2, 3 plus the 100. They went from 400 years to 9. So he's really not that much of a concern, is he? What the fuck? 400 years down to 9. That is the best plea deal I've ever heard of. That's okay, let me put that in terms of sales. If there was a jacket you wanted, a $400 leather jacket is gorgeous, and you walk in and it's on sale for $9, are you going to buy the jacket? Yeah, you're going to find the $12 after tax. You're damn right. You're buying the $400 jacket for $9. This man's facing 400 years. And then he could take 9? Yeah, you taking that 9. You taking that 9. Oh my God.
And I hear what both Mr. Matthews have said about the challenges facing you in your life, and I am sorry for the loss of your father. One would hope that to have
400 years.
anybody that they love taken from them in a violent way like murder might
400 years.
have an impact upon their lives that would lead them into the...
Down to 9. Down to 9, y'all. 400 years. Hold on. That's so... I can't even do... I can't even do the math of, like, how many hundredths or tenths or whatever. Unbelievable lawyering. I've been saying all along, we're in the presence of greatness with these attorneys, okay? I have been saying from day one, not the state. Look, you get what you pay for, right? We don't like to pay taxes in this country. So we tend to have kind of like shitty employees working for the government, okay? So the fact is, the lawyers we saw for the government are exactly what I expected. They're exactly what I expected. They're just as bad as I thought they would be. They were a little dirtier and scummier than I thought they were. But the lawyers for the defense were chef's kiss. I mean, top of the line, private, hardworking, hourly billing, just getting in there, fighting every day. I mean, the fight they put on every day. And I want to remind my audience, this fight is not over. There's still 2 defendants. We still have Shannon Stillwell, and we still have Yak Gotti. So we're going to be here every Friday recapping this trial until Fulton County finishes its job. If at all. Okay? Okay. All right, so yesterday came to a conclusion. I mean, y'all, we have been together watching this for a year now. Like, I have been streaming about this case for over a year. I didn't get into the case because of Young Thug. I couldn't care less, quite frankly, about Young Thug, Jeffrey Williams Jr. I don't like his music. I think it sounds awful. I got into this because I was interested in the First Amendment issue. I do not like the idea that our government could use our lyrics, our whatever, against us. That makes me like, ugh, so un-American, right? So that's how I got into this trial. That's why I came to this trial. Once I got here, I saw a massive amount of corruption and, I mean, just really actual stupidity and just poor lawyering, a lot of poor lawyering. And that kind of has kept me hooked, right? So just because Jeffrey Williams, because Young Thug is done, does not mean Lauren Cadilac is done. Do you understand? Lauren Cadilac is still going to be watching and reviewing this trial. I am still interested in watching Fulton County and attempting to hold them accountable by way of this thing we call social media and the society. Okay? So we're not done yet. But yesterday, we got somewhere. Yesterday we got somewhere. All right. So I had actually left my office and like opened my phone, and then I said, oh shit, they're in trial. Oh my God. So I watched this on the way home. So we are going to watch it all the way through together. Nene, he's banned, B-A-N-N-E-D. But, okay, so before I do that, there is this guy, his name's William Shakespeare. I'm sure you've heard of him. He wrote a few plays. One of them, called Romeo and Juliet, I'm sure you've heard of it. There was a movie by Baz Luhrmann that had Leonardo DiCaprio, who I'm sure you've heard of, and Claire Danes, who if you haven't heard of, you need to find. And they did Romeo and Juliet modern in that it was like modern cars, modern guns, instead of swords, you had guns, modern this, modern that. but they used Shakespeare's language, the actual language from the actual play. And there's a scene where Romeo, like the Capulets, and they have all been fighting, right? And so Romeo's in a fight, and the chief of police, or whatever he is, comes in, and he says, "Thou art banished. Thou art banished." And that's exactly what Whitaker said to Thug, okay? It is exactly what Whitaker said to Thug. She said, "Thou art banished." And it's actually the banishment of Romeo that leads to his and Juliet's eventual death, because that causes the confusion and so on and so forth. When Paige said, "You are banned from the greater Atlanta metro area," I just heard, "Thou art banished." Oh, shit. Okay. Here we go. I mean, Susan, I'm not going to debate all of this with you, but you're dead ass wrong. So, I'm sorry. It is not widely available. It is not as easy as you think. If you think it's easy, that means you're not actually part of the struggle. Here we go.
We'll do that in just a minute. You can go ahead with the colloquy.
And Your Honor, we'll have the waiver form as well.
Oh, God. Just by the way, I came in a little late yesterday, so I had this on 1.75 when I was watching. If you put Love at twice speed, she almost speaks at a regular pace. Watch. It's almost a regular pace. I'm going to put it on 2 times. Here we go.
I believe that the court had one.
I've got blanks. Y'all filled one out, right?
We have.
Okay.
Mr. Williams, are you the same Jeffrey Williams indicted in case number 22SC183572?
Yes.
Okay. And are you also known as Young Thug?
Yes.
Are you at this time taking or under the influence of any alcohol, drugs, or medication?
No.
Is there
See how she sounds like a normal pace? I have her at 2 times speed. She is such a fucking slow speaker. You put her at 2 times and she sounds normal.
any medication that you normally take that you have not been given today?
No.
How old are you?
33.
And how far have you gone in school?
9.
Say that one more time.
9.
Okay. Are you able to read, write, and understand the English language?
Yes.
All right. Do you understand that you are charged with the following offenses? Conspiracy to violate the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, participation in criminal street gang activity, the leadership charge, participation in criminal street gang activity, violation of the Georgia Controlled Substances Act, 3 counts, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and possession of a machine gun. Do you understand that?
Yes.
All right. And do you understand that you have the right to plead either guilty or not guilty to these charges, and that if you plead not guilty or remain silent, you will continue to receive a jury trial?
Yes.
All right. And
Okay, I have her on 2 times speed, and she's just now sounding like a normal human being. Gogo's asking, what can we do about the behavior you noticed by the prosecution? First, don't reelect Fani, first and foremost. But secondly, you can go back and find specific incidences of Miss Love violating the state bar ethics rules and send that in a bar grievance. Okay, and show with links to this specifically, here's your rule, here's how she violated it. Here's your rule, here's how she violated it, and here's the link showing it.
Yes.
do you need additional time to discuss this case with your attorneys?
No. You do.
And do you, Mr.
Yes.
The state is unaware of any outstanding warrants related to these charges. Do you or your attorneys know of any outstanding warrants related to these charges?
Anyway?
Outstanding warrants related to any of the charges in the indictment?
No. No. I don't believe so, Your Honor.
Okay. And I'm unaware of any as well, Your Honor.
I am as well.
Thank you.
Yes.
And each of the charges that you are pleading guilty to?
Yes.
All right.
Hi,
Your Honor, with
Christian.
respect to the charges that Mr. Williams faces, count 1 carries a minimum charge of 5 years and a maximum charge of 20 years in prison, or up to a $25,000 fine, or both.
Isn't it a $15,000 fine because wasn't it the version of the statute in effect at the time, or was that the same for RICO? Was RICO 25?
Yes, RICO
Okay.
25.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Count 56 carries a minimum sentence of 5 years in prison, a maximum of 20 years in prison, consecutive to any other sentence, with a fine of $10,000 to $15,000, or both.
Okay.
Count 57 carries a minimum sentence of 5 years in prison and a maximum sentence of 20 years in prison. Count 58 carries a minimum sentence of 1 and a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. Count 59 carries a sentence range of 5 to 30 years in prison. Count 60 carries a sentence
Hang on, slow down just a second.
No,
That's
please,
the
hurry
charge
up,
itself,
bitch.
I believe with intent to distribute.
Let me look. 59 is codeine, and
Yes.
60 is cocaine.
Yes.
So,
Okay, so I hadn't realized this, but when he was arrested, they found enough quantity of cocaine, codeine, and marijuana that it was enough to distribute, okay? But I personally believe that at that level of wealth, you're not gonna buy, like, you know, you're not buying a quarter ounce of weed, right? Like, you're not even gonna buy an ounce. When you buy like a pound at a time, if you had the money, like, wouldn't it be less expensive to buy, like, you're Costco buying your drugs, basically. You're buying them in bulk. And so, to me, like, yeah, of course. I don't think he meant to distribute the drugs. When I hear that, I think he meant to take them. Yeah, I think Nene, it was personal. But I think the quantity was so much that it qualified as, you know, distribution amounts, right? And so that's my guess. I think that was his personal drugs.
Your Honor, it is with the intent to distribute, so my reading of the statute is that it carries the range of 5 to 30.
okay.
And Your Honor, also, as I have the indictment in my hand from Ms. Rosser, may I pass it to counsel for Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Thank you. Range of 1 to 5 years in prison. Count 61 carries a mandatory 5 years consecutive to the underlying felony. Count 62 carries... Were you aware of that, Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Do you understand
So almost all the
that
crimes
neither
they
the
got
court
him
nor
on
the district attorney's office
were just stuff he had in his house. They're not even like crimes. They're like, well, I mean, they are crimes. It is a crime to possess that stuff. But it was like they got it on the search when they arrested him. They didn't get it because they like investigated or found him to be distributing, you know.
has anything to do with parole or the Department of Corrections or the Board of Pardons and Paroles, and that if you are sentenced to confinement in the Georgia Department of Corrections, no one can guarantee parole.
You can say yes.
What?
Yes, you can say that.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Parole.
Your Honor, may I allow Mr. Williams time to finish signing the indictment?
Okay.
Your Honor, with permission, may I approach with a member of Mr. Williams' team?
You may.
Thank you.
So doctors don't prescribe legal marijuana in Georgia because it's not legal there. So
Mr. Williams, do you understand that this is a non-negotiated plea of guilty, and that since your guilty plea is a blind plea or a non-negotiated plea, the state is making a recommendation of sentencing to the court, notwithstanding the fact that this is a blind plea? You understand that, Mr. Williams? Okay.
okay, so
And Mr. Williams, were you aware of the state's
do all of y'all understand what that means? The blind plea. If not, I'll explain. So, okay. So far, we had heard negotiated pleas. All right? Negotiated means that both the defense and the prosecution literally negotiated back and forth and came up with an idea of what they both felt was acceptable for the defendant and the crime. Okay, that's a negotiated plea. As I understand it, the offered plea is a plea where you say, look, I'm broke, so I'm saying yes, but I actually didn't do this shit. It's a best for me type plea. I gotta do it because I got bills to pay plea. Then you have this, which is called a blind plea. All right. Now, a blind plea is usually pretty risky because essentially you and the prosecution and the defense come together and they say, okay, defense will plead to these, prosecution says, I'll drop these, but they can't agree to the punishment. And that's what happened here. Brian Steele in an interview afterwards said that the state was trying to put too many stipulations they could not agree to. They said, you know what, we'll just go have the judge deal with it, and we'll have the judge tell us how it is and what it should be. And I saw someone in the chat say that was really ballsy. I would say that it's usually really ballsy, but in this case it wasn't. I think in this case, Brian Steele knew that Whitaker would be more reasonable. He knew that Whitaker would not put all of these stipulations that the state was trying to put on, and my understanding is the state was trying to put on some serious stipulations that would have made Thug's life really, really difficult to live. And so Steele was like, no, we're not going to accept that. He knew, he's worked in this courtroom enough, he knew Whitaker would be reasonable. And it was right. I think it was right. No, Justin, you must be late to the show. We care about the other two defendants, which is why we're covering the case. And I'll be here every Friday until Fulton County finishes the job. Go ahead and rewind before you comment. All right, here we go.
Previous offer that was turned down prior to your making this non-negotiated plea.
Yes.
All right. And Your Honor, at this time, the state is making a recommendation of 45 years with 25 to serve in custody, followed by 20 on probation, subject to the special requirements of 1615 the gang statute.
All right, and do you want to break down for me what your recommended sentence on each count is?
Yes, Your Honor. The state is recommending on count 1, 5 years to serve. Count 56, 20 years to serve consecutively.
I wonder what he's saying here. First of all, I think it's adorable how Thug has to like come down this low to talk to Brian. But secondly, I wonder what they're saying.
To count 1. Count 57, 5 years of probation to serve consecutively to count 56. Count 58, 10 years of probation to serve concurrently with count 57. Count 59, 5 years of current with
Blah, blah, blah.
and count
I hate her
62,
voice.
10 years of probation consecutive to count 61.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Williams, did you discuss the state's previous offer?
Was on the record for me, please.
I can, Your Honor.
Thank you.
The state's previous offer was a total.
Okay, so this is essentially an overview of what the state was offering him. They didn't get into the details, and the details are why he refused the offer and decided to go with the blind plea.
Of 43 years with 20 to serve, 20 years, 5 years to serve on count 56, commuted to time served, followed by 15 years on probation. On count 58, the sentence was 10 years to serve in the Georgia Department of Corrections, consecutive to count 56. Count 59 was 3 years to serve in the Georgia Department of Corrections, consecutive to counts 56 and 58. Count 60 was 5 years to serve in the Georgia Department of Corrections, consecutive to counts 56, 58, and 59. Count 61 was 5 years to serve in the Georgia Department of Corrections, consecutive to counts 56, 58, 59, and 60.
Was that the entirety of what the sentence was?
No, Your Honor.
I mean, there were special conditions, so y'all were null.
Okay, so Paris, Steele does not look stressed at all. That is not the look of stress. That is the look of irritation. Okay. He is irritated as shit. He, like us, cannot stand the voice of Adrian Love. He can't stand that she does everything incorrectly. But he is also irritated that they're not going through with the trial. If it was up to Steele, they would have gone through with the trial. But it isn't up to Steele. It's up to Thug. And Thug wanted to go home. Okay, Thug wanted to go home. Steele wanted to fight, but Thug wanted to go home. So this is what you got.
Allcross, 1 and 62?
Yes, as part of the recommended sentence, in exchange for the defendant agreeing to the special conditions that we asked the court to impose, the state was willing to null pros count 1, count 57, and count 62.
Okay, and then all of that consecutive to the probation, that was going to be what we call backloaded, and what were y'all proposing with regard to that, since it was to follow the probated sentence?
The total sentence was 43 years to serve, with the first 5 years in prison commuted to time served, followed by 15 years on probation, followed by 23 years in prison, which would have been served in confinement, except that if defendant had complied with the special conditions of probation imposed as part of the sentence, the backloaded portion of defendant's sentence would have been commuted. However, should defendant had violated any special condition of probation within the first 15 years of his sentence, his probated sentence would have immediately been revoked, and he would have been required to serve the entire remainder of his sentence confined to the Georgia Department of
That
Corrections.
was the
All right, so as
issue.
long as
Okay, that was Steele's issue. There were a bunch of these special little things that Georgia had Thug having to do. Okay, and Steele was like, nah, no. You can put conditions, but you can't put all of those conditions. Okay, and so it's because of all of those conditions that they decided, let's toss it over to the judge, off to Whitaker. Wavy, he did not take a plea of RICO. He didn't take the RICO. They dropped the RICO.
he had successfully completed his 15 years of probation, the 23 years that was going to follow it was going to be commuted to time served as long as his probation was successful. Is that right?
Yes, Your Honor. And the special with the court like for us to.
No, I was really more interested in the.
Okay, so basically what they said is they were going to give him a bunch of years. He was going to be on probation for 15. The service of time was going to be commuted to the time already served. So he would leave that day on probation, 15 years probation, having to do all this special shit that the government wants. The minute he messes up on their stuff, he goes back to jail and serves 25 years. Okay, here we go.
The length of sentence and what y'all had. I know you didn't reach agreement, but y'all, that's what the last offer had been, with, of course, a bunch of special conditions, which I guess is where the hang-up is. I don't know.
Right. Defendant did not want to agree to the special conditions.
All right.
Exactly.
So basically, your understanding too, Mr.
Yes, Your Honor.
Steele
It would have been,
and
yes, Your Honor. Mr. Williams would have been released today for 15 years on probation. If he successfully completes that probation, then he would not have to go to custody. If he did not, he'd face probation revocation as well as 23 years, as the court said, backloaded in the Georgia prison system. But we could not come to terms on all the conditions that the district attorney was insisting on.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Love.
And Mr. Williams, were you aware of that previous offer as well as all of the requirements that that offer would have entailed?
Yes.
Okay. And had you had enough time to discuss that particular offer with your attorneys?
Yes.
All right. The previous offer. Do you understand that the court can impose any sentence authorized by law, including a higher sentence than that recommended by the state, up to the maximum sentence on each charge in this indictment? Do you understand, Mr. Williams? Do you understand that if you enter into a non-negotiated plea, you do not have a right to withdraw your plea once the sentence has been announced?
Yes.
Do you understand that this is a guilty plea which is permanently recorded on your criminal history?
Yes.
Do you understand that this plea may be used to enhance sentencing on other convictions in this jurisdiction as well as in other jurisdictions, including in the federal courts?
Yes.
Do you understand that if you are currently on probation or parole, your probation or parole may be revoked based on your entering a guilty plea today?
I'm not on probation.
Okay, so you're not on
If you were on probation, but if you're not, then it doesn't matter.
Okay. Do you understand that if you are placed on probation of any kind by this court, you cannot violate any criminal laws of any governmental unit or any special conditions of probations without being subject to revocation for the balance of the sentence the court imposes?
Yes, I know.
Do you understand that you are not allowed to possess or use a firearm while on probation?
Yes.
Do you understand that if you are not a United States citizen, a guilty plea conviction will affect your immigration status and will result in deportation, just like a conviction at a trial would, and that this is true regardless of any advice by your attorney or anyone else?
Yes.
Do you understand that neither the court, your attorney, nor the district attorney's office has anything to do with parole, and the Department of Corrections or Board of Pardons and Paroles, and that no one can guarantee parole no matter what anyone has told you?
Yes.
Do you understand that there may be other adverse or unfavorable to vote and sport a firearm you use, receive, possess, or transport of up to 1 to 15 years in prison?
Yes.
This is by entering a plea of guilty to have the right to a trial by jury, those things.
Yes.
Do you understand that by pleading guilty, you are giving up the following rights? The right to pursue at the continued trial, the right to subpoena witnesses and compel the victim.
No.
Is it your decision to waive these rights and enter a guilty plea because you are in fact guilty?
Yes. Well, Your Honor, may I interject?
You may.
Your Honor, on count 1, which is the racketeering conspiracy count, Mr. Williams is tendering a plea under nolo contendere. As to count 56, which is participation in criminal street gang activity as being a leader or supervisor or organizer, Mr. Williams is also tendering a plea to this honorable court under nolo contendere. The balance of the counts that he is tendering a guilty plea.
Your Honor,
Yes, ma'am.
would the court like to hear from the state or not?
About the NOLO issues?
Yes, yes.
Sure.
Your Honor, the state asked that the court not accept a nolo plea and require either a guilty plea or a not guilty plea as to these charges.
All right. I'm going to permit a NOLO plea.
Okay, so let me tell you what a nolo plea is, all right? Nolo contendere is Latin for I do not wish to contend. So this is a no contest plea. This is a plea in which the defendant accepts punishment but without accepting guilt. Kind of like in civil, you've heard about, in a release of a civil case, they say, well, we didn't do it, but we'll pay you because we know litigation is long and expensive. The same kind of thing. I didn't do it. I'm accepting the plea and the punishment, but I didn't do it, and I'm not going to argue it out. Okay, so.
To counts 1 and 56.
All right. Mr. Williams, as to count 57, participation in criminal street gang activity, how do you plead?
I plead guilty.
As to count 58, violation of the Georgia Controlled Substances Act, how do you plead?
Guilty.
As to count 59, violation of the Georgia Controlled Substances Act, how do you plead?
Guilty.
As to count 60, violation of the Georgia Controlled Substances Act, how do you plead?
Guilty.
As to count 61, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, how do you plead?
Guilty.
And as to count 1, conspiracy to violate the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, how do you plead?
Nolo.
As to count 56, participation in criminal street gang activity under the leadership charge, how do you plead?
Nolo.
I think you didn't ask about count 62.
As to count, thank you, Your Honor. As to count 62, possession of a machine gun, how do you plead?
Guilty.
Are you pleading guilty to the offenses you have indicated because you are...
Okay, I have been saying this from the beginning, but the fact that possessing a machine gun is illegal in the state of Georgia, to me, is like the best evidence of how stupid that state is, how much it sucks. We're Americans, okay? If we aren't felons, we don't have something... We should be allowed to own a gun. Machine or not. It's ridiculous. All right, here we go. I hate
guilty
Georgia.
of these charges?
Yes.
All right. Are your guilty pleas and your NOLO pleas freely and voluntarily given with the full knowledge of the charges against you?
Yes.
Do you understand that you may have only a limited right to appeal and ability
To file a direct appeal from this guilty plea, and until the end of this term of court, to file a motion seeking to withdraw the guilty plea, which does not mean it would be granted, but that's the time period, okay?
What's the rate of appeal?
Well, you can talk to your attorneys more about it, but it would be up to one of the, like the Court of Appeals, I think is where this one would go. Those are just the time periods.
And Your Honor, the state, in addition to the sentence we are asking that the court to impose,
Okay.
we would also be asking the court to require or to forfeit, have defendant forfeit all the property that has been seized and that is currently being held that was found or recovered or taken from his home after it was searched on May 9th.
Do you have any kind of list of what?
Of course she wants the property. That's fucking... Mass says, do insurance companies use NOLO? No, in civil law we don't call it NOLO. Someone said, been screaming free thug for so long, now we could say thug free. We can also say free Shannon and free Yak, alright? I know, Justin, my Texas shows everywhere I go, it's ridiculous. Alright, here we go.
That property is. I mean, I'm not familiar with what was seized.
And Your Honor, we're not
do.
agreeing.
Oh, I mean, I assume you aren't agreeing to anything.
We're not agreeing to it.
We said it is a negotiated plea.
We're not, but we do have a list of
All right.
free
Do you have
items.
it available right now?
Yes, actually, would the court permit us to send it electronically?
So my understanding is they did a big civil forfeiture. They took all his stuff, all this expensive stuff. But like a bunch of it didn't belong to him. There's a couple companies that have suits because their stuff was civil forfeiture.
Sure, that's fine. And then if that is not imposed as a condition, is it just get litigated as like any forfeiture matter?
Yes.
Yeah, it would be litigated later on.
It's
Yes.
a civil separate filing in this court. It's
Yeah,
not
it's
related
a
to the crime.
separate
It's a related case, but it's unrelated.
Understood.
And we are sending that to Your Honor
Thank you.
At this time. And as it relates to the conditions of a conviction under 1615-4, Your Honor, we would ask, or as part of the sentence, defendant would be required to adhere to the requirements, the sentencing requirements of the gang statute, which at least in part require that he not associate with any gang members whatsoever. And I can read the rest of that into the record if the court requires, or I can continue.
That I guess was being negotiated was some exception for, I think, somebody that is contractually obligated on his record label. Is that something that the state would still be in agreement to?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
All right. Your Honor, as part of the requirements of 1615-4,
Yes.
defendant would, one moment, Your Honor, under the code section, shall require as a special condition of the sentence that the person sentenced shall not knowingly
Wait,
have...
just a tad, because there's a part where we're taking it down. When we start reading, we read really fast. So go ahead.
This code section shall require as a special condition of the sentence that the person sentenced shall not knowingly have contact of any kind or character within cases in which family or been committed and under the basic continue
So Love is basically arguing
throughout
that he can't
the time between 2000
communicate with other gang members, but it's like, this is his job.
and 13 enterprise known as Young Slime Life, both in along with assault and armed robbery. As alleged in the indictment, defendant and unindicted and indicted co-conspirators committed acts to by using social media posts. Defendant is charged with being a leader of the gang YSL, and evidence has been presented by accomplices and co-founders of YSL. The defendant, as shown by some of his own social media postings, was the founder, one of the founders in Cleveland. Incidents that have involved conflicts between YSL members and...
Honestly, guys, I think Thug's gonna be at the chiropractor today. I think that's the first. He's always doing this thing with the neck, and he looks like he needs an adjustment.
if gang members rushing outside during shootings to ensure Mr. Williams' safety, communication with members of YSL after those incidents of a barbershop community test and
Sorry, guys, I could see in her fucking voice. Uh-oh, my computer got mad at me.
If we whack them, YSL slimy and shady. This is Defendant Williams released a video on YouTube of a song wherein he states, "I shot at his mommy. Now he no longer mentions me. Act like you want war, and they're gonna smoke you like a blunt." Another song, I escaped every one of the licks because I was supposed to be rich. I don't care nothing about a cop. I'm just telling you how it is. I done did the robbing. I done did the jacking. Now I'm full rapping. Gave the lawyer close to $2 million. He handles all the killing. We don't speak about shit on wax. It's all my business. We know to kill the biggest cats of all kittens. We whack him. Don't fold. Pick his ass up. This was in Mother Song. Like I'm moving. I get Thomas Jr. Falls. 29 black items. They're 22.
Oh, sorry.
Two,
She's
Jaden
just so
Myrick
gross
sought
and
permission from Defendant Williams to stab Mr. Bennett while Mr. Bennett resided with Mr. Myrick at the jail. Mr. Myrick reached out to co-indict Hylton, was also involved in the back and forth shootings back in jail. And after that stabbing, Mr. Myrick reached out multiple times to Mr. Adams for some type of compensation for the stabbing. Mr. Adams reached out to Mr. Garlington, a conspirator, and think of Mr. an offense. There were a number of Mr. Shamel drinks, 2022, and waited at marriage with the after grand jury phone beside the evidence between Mr. Huey, Williams, Flat, asking lawyer off. Mr. Williams responded. Mr. Huey said, "Slat, you can't cash out me $500 so I can make a payment to my lawyer." Mr. Williams responded, "Slat." Mr. Huey sent him his phone number. Mr. Williams assured him through his
BT Dub, I'm just gonna start responding slat. Hey Lauren, how you doing? Slat. Hey, can you hand me the remote? Slat.
responses, Slat, that he would take care of them. Throughout Mr. Huey's phone, you see messages of this nature between Mr. Huey and Mr. Williams. The court point was made with the hope that Mr. Williams would, for being the leader of YSL here, and that the murder as a one of those acts.
There's a conviction on us.
Many of the statements made by the prosecutor we vehemently disagree with. The prosecutor stated many pieces of evidence and then took liberty that that is the state's theory. Mr. Williams has tendered a no contender plea to the RICO conspiracy count. And in that count, there are several overt acts. And the first one, Your Honor, deals with a traffic stop. It's on September 9th of 2013. And I won't go through every one because it might take a long time, but just for completeness for this, the court knows. Mr. Williams is driving a car. There is a dash cam video of the stop. The officer who testified at the trial 11 years later, the case was a gun was found under the passenger seat. Mr. Williams is not tied to the gun. He's not convicted of that. And the dash cam video that the officer said would have picked up sound as well as definitely video was never turned over to us, supposedly lost. Could not explain the loss. The armed robbery in another overt act of Mr. Dodson, D-O-D-S-O-N, has the following information. The state only, because we haven't called witnesses yet.
Video's
So
lost,
the state put
guys.
up a man who said nothing except, "I don't recall." And then they put in his prior recorded jail calls. That man was taken, his name is Mr. Bean, B-E-A-N. He was taken to Grady Hospital, and he was spoken with by a detective. The state vehemently accused me of lying to the jury, that the man never went, Mr. Bean was never taken to Grady Hospital, and that somehow I planted on him to say something on a recording where he said, the reason I implicated Jeffrey Williams is because the police told me that it would be easier for me. Then I had to go through the CAD reports and show that Mr. Bean was in fact taken to Grady Hospital, and Mr. Bean on recording told Detective Quinn, who of course told the truth. Yes, when I spoke to the detective previously, I did lie. Then, what the state doesn't tell the jury is that there's another man in the car. He was shot at the scene, he's arrested, he pled guilty. His name is Fred Prethro, P-R-E-T-H-O. And Mr. Prethro is in the Georgia State Prison System, easy to find. Mr. Prethro was in Grady Hospital also, unfortunately suffering from a gunshot wound. And you can hear the medical equipment behind him. And Detective Williams came in and was recording the whole conversation and said how many people were in the car. And Mr. Prethro names the people. Adrian Dean, who's the gentleman I just said, himself, and Walter Murphy. Are you sure there weren't a fourth person in the car? No, the three of us. The state doesn't call that person. The state does call Detective Williams. So I wanted to ask and inquire on that. The state, to obstruct, if that's obstruction, asked the predecessor court to prohibit me from getting into the fact of any conversation that would have impeached another witness. It's fine. Fred Prethro is on my witness list as well as a detective, and I have the recordings. In addition to that, Walter Murphy gave a statement while in the hospital, and his statement is very...
Okay, Miss Love just gave her closing statement. Steele is finally giving his. They lied. Here's where they did this. This is where he's finally. Oh Lord, he's happy. Oh, listen to him go off. He's not happy, but I'm sure he feels good to air these grievances. I am sure of it.
Very interesting. It's two different police reports, signed the same date, which is September 11th of 2013. And on the first 7 lines of the police report, they're identical. Then all of a sudden, when it gets to, on the right-hand police report, it says, Mr. Murphy stated that there were 3 people, I believe, I have to go back, in the vehicle. On the other police report, it states Mr. Murphy stated there were 4 people. There's no reason that they should be different. They're both signed the same. The state doesn't call that officer at all. I tried to ask Mr. Murphy about it. The state objects, and the predecessor judge sustained the objection. Mr. Williams was not involved in the Mr. Dodson. Miss Bennett, that was Mother's Day, May 12, 2013. She reports allegedly an armed robbery. The detective who testified here and investigated stated he never took out an arrest warrant for Mr. Williams. And he wrote in his police report, Miss Bennett is not truthful. That is the case that the state is talking about. The state, then, there was Brady evidence that they don't turn over, and we find out about it in court after they arrest Ms. Bennett because they say she's not cooperating, and it comes out that she told the prosecution over and over again that this did not happen the way that she reported it, and she doesn't remember. As to Donovan Thomas, and Mr. Williams has nothing but empathy, sympathy, and sorrow. They were friends. It is a lie. What the prosecution put before this jury is a lie. What happened here is the prosecution comes up with a theory because they need a motive, they think. I know you don't need a motive in reality to prove a murder case or any other case, but they wanted a motive. So they made it where Mr. Williams and a gentleman named Rich Homie Kwan, his name is Mr. Lamar, he's a performer, and Mr. Williams and Mr. Lamar were close. There are public documents, recordings, Mr. Lamar being interviewed almost every year, and then he talks about his time with this band or group called Rich Gang. And he says every year up to this past year, he God forbid died. We can't call him Mr. Williams. How close he is to Mr. Williams. The state, though, made it.
Look at Yak in this light pink. Ooh, I'm loving that. I know it's not the season for light pink, but it's so Miami Vice. I'm so into it.
In this case, we're trying to make it that Mr. Williams and Mr. Rich Homie Kwan are enemies because Rich Homie Kwan signed with a record label that has nothing to do with Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams doesn't sign that record label. That record label is owned by a gentleman named Brian Williams, also goes by Birdman, wildly successful. He started Drake's career. He started Mr. Dwayne Carter, performer known as Lil Wayne's career. He started Nicki Minaj's career, just fabulous, powerful person, well-respected in the industry. But the state wants it to be that Donovan Thomas interceded and would not let Rich Homie Kwan sign to Mr. Brian Birdman Williams. And that is the reason that Jeffrey Williams had a feud and killed Donovan Thomas. Your Honor, what the evidence would really show if we kept going to trial, and I could tell you that Mr. Adams and I never thought we'd be in front of this honorable court. We always thought it would go all the way through trial. Was the state is saying that Rich Homie Kwan and Jeffrey Williams don't speak since the fall, and they have a bad relation to the fall of 2014. We would have shown, and we served on the state, December 15, 2014. Jeffrey Williams in a private plane with Mr. Lamar, Rich Homie Kwan, and they are high-fiving and laughing with each other. That is on audio video. There's a man who the state hasn't called yet, Mr. Martinez Arnold, also known as Duke. It's on the state's witness list. He's represented by the Honorable Ashley Merchant. He's on that plane as well. He would have identified the item, and he would have testified that Mr. Williams and Mr. Lamar were very close in December 2014. Then on December 29th of 2014, Mr. Williams, Mr. Rich Homie Kwan, Mr. Arnold, others were at Brian Williams' home in Miami, Florida. There was a posting by Mr. Lamar, Rich Homie Kwan, and a picture of Mr. Arnold and Mr. Lamar, and they said, Mr. Lamar says, this is my number one man, Duke, or something to that effect. We would have put that into evidence. In addition to that, Your Honor, on December 8th, 2 days before Mr. Thomas, God forbid, was killed, Mr. Williams is with Mr. Thomas, as well as Mr. Sledge and Brian Williams in Brian Williams' tour bus outside of a fabulous entertainer, artist, Mr. Clifford Harris, T.I.'s studio,
fabulous.
and at that time, they were very close. But you also have the detective with the gang unit, Detective Underwood. I asked her within the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, did you do any, and she was on the gang unit the entire time, including today, and I asked her, do you have any evidence about Mr. Williams and Mr. Thomas being close friends? And she said yes. Of course I knew that. I said, how about in January of 2015, close to the time of Mr. Thomas's death? She said yes, they were close friends. Mr. Michael Sprinkle, he's a deputy district attorney in the Fulton County DA's office. He has a recording with Mr. Treadwell. You've heard the name O.G. Bentley. And in that, they're going through the evidence. And Mr. Treadwell is important because he has a child, too, actually, with Mr. Thomas's sister. So he's family. And Mr. Sprinkle states this is 2018, this is after the rental car, this is after all of the interviews of Mr. Copeland, this is after the interviews of Mr. Zachary. Mr. Sprinkle's in some of those interviews with Mr. Zachary. Mr. Sprinkle on tape, on recording, states, I do not know why anybody thinks Jeffrey Williams is involved in this killing. He and Donovan Thomas were close friends. It makes no sense to anyone. And Mr. Williams was never arrested, never charged, even in this, as the court just noted, with anything to do with Donovan Thomas's, God forbid, killing. In addition to that, Donovan Thomas has a place that he used to stay with a group of people on Auburn Avenue. Jeffrey Williams performed and did a music shoot there to try to help other people who are suffering in poverty to get out and to be able to be seen and to broadcast their music. Jeffrey Williams does that for everybody because he comes, Your Honor, from the struggle of total poverty, seeing people killed. He saw his brother die right in front of him, and the law enforcement, I'm not blaming anybody, everybody's on edge. The law enforcement would not get any help for him because there are all these people around. It is just, what Mr. Williams has gone through is wrong for everyone. It's not just Mr. Williams, it's that whole community, but he's trying to get people out of poverty and out of that community. I have been with Mr. Williams, where we have gone to speak with children together, and he tells them, don't be a rapper. Be like Ryan, be a lawyer, keep in school. He tells his children, get your education. His family, his whole being, Your Honor, is trying to break the chains of poverty for others, and he has been spun in this courtroom with false statements and allegations against Mr. Williams at every turn. In addition to that, Your Honor, the state talks about the fact that Mr. Williams takes people to Miami. You would have heard evidence if we went forward. I put all these people on my witness list. Not one person on my witness list has been interviewed by law enforcement or the prosecution. They have investigated this case for 15 years. They haven't interviewed all these people. The Sprinter van that you heard about, that was already booked days before. Going to Miami, Florida, Mr. Williams and Mr. Brian Birdman Williams, they did a video shoot for a music video. If anybody would have gone further with the expert for the state, they would have seen that Mr. Williams' cell phone does not contact any of the co-defendants that are named here in Miami, and Mr. Williams stays at a separate location than any of those persons. He would always take people who can't afford it on airplanes, on buses, on tours, to his concerts. He let everyone go because, Your Honor, they never left that area. He wanted to show people you have an opportunity. The world is big. Mr. Williams gave jobs to everybody who'd want to work. He gave them jobs in security. And I'm not insulting them. They really weren't their jobs, but they were being mentored, but they were given titles and tried to give them respect and opportunity. But if they did not wish to work, Mr. Williams would not allow them to work with them. This has all been turned on its head by the state. The fact that the state has put in Mr. Williams' lyrics are offensive. Mr. Williams has tens of thousands of recordings. On our witness list, we are bringing in all of his people, his recording artists, his engineers, his managers, his record label, and an expert, the Honorable Dr. Eric Nielsen, to talk about how Mr. Williams creates his music. His music is then changed around and merged. Mr. Williams, some of the lyrics you just heard are not even uttered by Mr. Williams. The state has no idea when these lyrics were made. Some of them were made before the shooting of Donovan Thomas, that the state is saying this applies to Donovan Thomas killing with the Tahoe. They are so far afield of where we need to be when we are trying to, God forbid, take somebody's liberty, Your Honor. The state is talking about things like F the judge and I rep my life for real. That's not even said by Mr. Williams, but they don't care to find out. They are on a tunnel vision to try to convict a man who should not be convicted. The statement about I never killed nobody, but I got something to do with that body. If the state just bothered to talk with anybody, that is a Nicki Minaj song with Jeffrey Williams. It is written by Nicki Minaj. That is on the text messages I gave, not the text message, the Instagram or Twitter rather, that I gave to the state. That is out well before this, but the state doesn't care. This was out in 2015 or 16 or 17 or 18, I can't remember, I think 18, where Mr. Williams was asked who wrote anybody, and his response is anybody was written by Nicki Minaj, and it was. But it was really written and sung. It's a takeoff of a song by Tupac. There's a song that it parallels, which is an inspiration. But here we are with the state. Also, I never killed nobody, but I got something to do with the body. The next line comes up is it's a truancy body. The state can't explain that, so they just conveniently leave it out. Your Honor, there were wiretaps on this case.
I agree with Steele on this. It is offensive for them to use his lyrics. It should offend every American out there for art, which is protected by the First Amendment, to be used against him. We should all be offended. Truly.
Mr. Williams, it was going to come out, there was an application to wiretap his phone. The state never presented to a judge. That speaks volumes. The leader of the YSL criminal street gang, who's been involved from 2012 until his arrest, and even according to the state while we sit here, they never even tried to wiretap his phone. It might have been because they don't really know what his phone number is. So all these communications are being told about with Mr. Huey, I'm not so sure the state could have gotten anybody to say that's Mr. Williams' phone. This is how the trial has gone for us.
Did you see that? Did you see Thug's face? Hold on. Look at his micro expression. Hold on.
Wiretaps
Watch his
on this
face.
case. Mr. Williams, it was going to come out, there was an application to wiretap his phone. The state never presented to a judge. That speaks volumes. The leader of the YSL criminal street gang, who's been involved from 2012 until his arrest, and even according to the state while we sit here, they never even tried to wiretap his phone. It might have been because they don't really know what his phone number is. So all these communications are being told about with Mr. Huey, I'm not so sure the state could have gotten anybody to say that's Mr. Williams' phone. This is how the trial...
See that smirk? I love it.
has gone for us. But we sit here for almost 2 years since we did our jury selection initiation on January 4th, 2023. Mr. Williams has been sitting in a jail since May 9th, 2022. This is 2.5 years waiting for the conclusion of the state's case and a verdict from the jury, and that's why he's tendering this plea. I'm telling the court, this, and the court knows when you came out the first time, it's very hard for Mr. Williams. I'm not supportive of what we're doing right now. I'm not against it. But I told Mr. Williams, I told Mr. Williams that I think we're winning the trial and we should go to verdict. But he told me I can't wait another 3 months if there is any possibility I could go home because I have children that are hurting. I have things to do, and he has some medical issues that he would like to tend to. He eats out of a bag, Your Honor. He eats processed food only. He gained 75 pounds during trial. He's lost it since. But it is hard. You know, for me, it's only 3 more months.
Not the 75. He has lost some weight, though. I noticed that, okay? But Steele is explaining. Steele wants to go on with trial. He thinks he's winning. He wants to move through. But Thug says, I gotta go home. I got kids. I got a kidney issue or whatever his issue is. You know, his diabetes, I think. Like, he wants to go home. So I'm sure Steele is, all that look you see in Steele's face of frustration is really that he's just frustrated that he doesn't get to finish and win.
It's enjoyable, actually. I enjoy coming. It's not that enjoyable for Mr. Williams. He told me he wakes up. I said, he wakes up every day, and it's another day in HE blank blank. Your Honor, the state is talking about, in this case, they put in social media. The Honorable Court was not here, but the state put in that Mr. Williams, in the indictment, Mr. Williams put out a call for murder. He put $24 million murder for hire on a person's head. That is a lot of money, and that is awful. If they would have read the chat, the Instagram chat, Mr. Williams, right above it, there's a picture of a very well-known, very accomplished musical artist who actually had surgically implanted in his forehead a pink diamond worth $24 million that day. That's what Mr. Williams was talking about. That's the type of evidence that is coming from the state of Georgia in this case. It is wrong. This is all wrong. And I know we're pleading guilty, and I know we're pleading no low, and I know we're asking the Honorable Court for a certain sentence, and we'll get to it with the court's permission, but this is the type of evidence that there is. But it is holding this man hostage. And that's not really what we're supposed to do, district attorney time, in the state of Georgia or anywhere. The state then, because I opened on that, then they never bothered to put in all of the chats. Why did it take me to read the chats? In addition to that, going back to Donovan Thomas, talking about Mr. Williams involved, the state did a geofence. A geofence tracks his devices. It doesn't have to be a phone. It could be an iPad. It could be any type of electronic device that targets and is used. You don't have to be on the phone. It's the contact. If he has an app open, it'll capture. And the state targeted the McDonald's, where they keep saying that Mr. Williams met with people there. They targeted the barbershop where the killing occurred. And they targeted two locations. And it comes out Ms. Williams' devices are not there. It's exculpatory. I don't get that information. I got that because I interviewed Lieutenant Crabtree, and the results can't be found, according to prosecution. I did a motion for that. They just can't find it. That is great evidence for Mr. Williams. It would have also shown clearly that when he does go down from his house after getting this call that I'll talk about from Demise McMullen, he's not with these other people. And the expert for the state, the FBI agent who does the telephone analysis, Mr. Williams' phone does not ping off the same tower as a Demise McMullen or a Mr. Copeland or a Mr. Garlington or whomever. The state of Georgia has misrepresented for 2 years in front of this jury. They've hidden evidence. They've violated Brady. They've falsely accused Mr. Williams. Your Honor, saying that Mr. Williams gets that call 7 minutes after, the state said 6, it was 7 minutes after the killing of Donovan Thomas from Demise McMullen. Mr. Williams was already out of his home. Mr. Demise McMullen is calling Mr. Williams. He's not even there. He's going down to meet with Mr. Kelvin Treadwell, also known as O.G. Bentley. O.G. Bentley was supposed to go to Miami, Florida. They were talking about this deal. And Mr. Williams, that day, he was given another contract. Mr. Williams, by this time, he went from zero money. He is a multimillionaire at the time. He doesn't need the Cleveland Avenue drug deals for $15. He doesn't need the shooting.
Exactly.
He doesn't need living in
Thank you. What does he need with 17 grams of weed? Like, get out of here.
Atlanta. Since 2018, 19, 20, 21, he came back at the very end of 21. 6 months, and he got arrested in May of 2022. In his house, Your Honor, we have everyone on the witness list. There are 12 people living at the house. Mr. Williams opens up any of a car that he has. He'll rent cars for people. Any home he has, he will allow people to live in hotels because people that he knows, unfortunately, are homeless. And he gives them all places to stay, cars to drive around. He is not involved in criminal activity. Mr. Williams just got back in our country. His passport shows it. Right before he was arrested on May 9th of 2022, there were other people in the house with the drugs and the guns. There were people whose the guns are in their names. They were going to come in court and claim the guns. Everybody else was doing as well, but Mr. Williams has entered a guilty plea. I'm not going back on that, but I just want you to know that this case is just wrong to do to somebody with no bond and to hold him hostage. He wants to, he may not do it. He's aware of that. He's aware of that. But the state offered him 15 years on probation. But they keep piling on these conditions. He just said, he made up his mind. He said, I'm just going to go with it. I got to get home. Judge may not let me home, but I'm not doing these conditions and admit that I'm the leader and I'm involved in the killing of my music, just promoted everybody to do it. He's not going to do that. So he did not do that, and that's how we wound up here. The state, the night of the killing, people came to Mr. Williams' home. The state tells the court, he said, lay low. What they don't tell you is right after that, he gave money to Mr. Sledge, who said, they're going to kill me. They think I did it. And Mr. Williams said, if you had anything to do with it, I want to be with you. And Mr. Sledge said, I just need a hotel room with my children and my bride or my significant other to get to. And Mr. Williams said, be safe, lay low. That's the lay low. In addition to that, Mr. Williams told Mr. Copeland, Mr. Copeland's with the police. Hours after the killing of Mr. Donovan Thomas, Mr. Copeland goes to the police department. Mr. Williams is the person who told him to go. Mr. Copeland said, what do I do? They're shooting at my house, at my family's house, at my significant other's mother's house. And Mr. Williams said, if you had anything to do with the murder, get out of here. Mr. Copeland denied it. Mr. Williams said, then go tell the police. Mr. Copeland said, you want me to go to the police? And Mr. Williams said, if you had nothing to do with it, they think you did, go to the police. In addition to that, Mr. Copeland said, well, I'm going to retaliate. Mr. Williams told him, don't do that. Let 12 handle. That's on recordings. That is on recordings on January 11th of 2015 with Detective Thorpe.
The 12 handle.
Your Honor, as far as Dwayne Carter, the performer known as Lil Wayne, Mr. Williams had no conflict with him. They are friends. We were presenting evidence that right before this shooting of the tour bus is April 26th of 2015. Mr. Williams is performing in New Orleans area. And that's the area where it's Holly Grove, where Mr. Carter, Lil Wayne, performer known as Lil Wayne, comes from. And in order to drum up popularity and interest, people get on the internet and they start what's called rap battles, arguments, feuds. That's what happened here, and you would have heard testimony from Mr. Williams' management that they said, start a rap battle, it'll be better for your career. Mr. Dwayne Carter is aware of that. Mr. Dwayne Carter's interviewed, the state's aware of this. He has interviews after this. Are you mad? What's the real deal with Jeffrey Williams? He states, no. He's great with me. He brought popularity to me. He loves me. He idolizes me, and I love working with him. They did an album together. In 2014, they're in the studio together, making music together. It is all made up that Mr. Williams is involved. Mr. Williams gives a statement. The state refuses to put it in and then stop me, the previous judge, from cross-examining the detective. His name is Racy. He met with Mr. Williams in the DeKalb County Jail on the 15th day of July 2015. Mr. Williams was arrested that day. And there's a long interview. And Mr. Williams waives his right to counsel. He tells them, I'm his lawyer. They say, you don't want to speak to us? You don't have to. He said, well, I'll speak with you. And they asked Mr. Williams these questions. What about Lil Wayne's shooting? He said, it was outrageous. I love him. That's my idol. I love Lil Wayne. How about this battle? He says it's promotion. They asked about his rap lyrics. It's the only person that the state ever did anything about rap lyrics with. And they asked Mr. Williams, what about the rap lyrics? And he tells them, it's hyperbole. He didn't use that word. He used the word, it's made up. It's rhyming. It's made up. Not like the state is saying that I rap lyrics for real. That's not even Mr. Williams' utterance. Your Honor, the point I'm trying to make to you is what the state of Georgia has presented to this jury in this courtroom the past year has been full of untruths. And they know it. The state says that Mr. Williams had a conflict because he named an album with Dwayne Carter, and Dwayne Carter didn't like that. Dwayne Carter's interviewed. He said, that was one of the nicest things anyone could have done to me. It shows how much he really appreciates me. It shows respect and honor, and I appreciate what he did. The state knows this.
No, you know what? Honestly, Steele is giving the state too much credit. I do not think the state knows this. Look, I Googled the day that Ex-parte was on about the lyrics. I Googled copyright date Young Thug hot, because that's the only song I know. You know what came up? A very easy to open Excel spreadsheet provided by the Copyright Office, the U.S. Patent Office. And then I could just search it by the name of the song or by the artist, and it would say the day they applied for the copyright. Why would that be significant? because he's singing about the Tahoe, right? And the government says, oh, well, he's singing about the Tahoe, he had to have done the murder. Well, if you check the copyright, you know, if it's copyrighted on July 1st, 2014, you know it was written before July 1st, 2014. Hello? You have to write it before you can copyright it. But they didn't even do that. They didn't do any investigating, okay? They didn't do... I have friends who have been pissed off at a man who have done better investigations than this, okay? Come on. So no, I don't think the state actually did any of that. I think Steele's giving it way too much credit. The laziest detectives in Fulton County are in the gang unit.
Jimmy Winfrey. What the state did is they put in a recording. It's not Mr. Williams. It's a jail recording, Mr. Winfrey and an unknown person. And an unknown person says, when you get out, you're going to get a Porsche and $250,000. Mr. Williams not privy to that. The state looked at all of Mr. Williams' bank records, everything. They undressed him financially. There's zero evidence Mr. Williams did anything for Mr. Winfrey. The state tells you that Mr. Winfrey asked for money for a lawyer. The conversation was, and it's recorded, it was with Mr. Williams' manager. And Jimmy Winfrey said, I need to show that I was gainfully employed for the court. Can you get me something from YSL? And the manager said, yeah, if we have it. And if it's true, yes, you can have it. That is it. There's no evidence that Mr. Williams paid for anybody's lawyer, Mr. Winfrey or otherwise. In addition to that, Your Honor, the social media postings with Mr. Rashawn Bennett, also known as YFN Lucy. So Mr. Williams, the state tells Mr. Bennett on social media, I would have killed you if I didn't like the way you take care of your mother and children. That is the post. What they don't tell you is Mr. Bennett, who is also, to his credit, trying to drum up his career. Mr. Bennett is picking on Mr. Williams, who's a much higher profile artist than Mr. Bennett at that time. And Mr. Bennett is saying that he slept with Mr. Williams' fiancée while Mr. Williams and she are a significant couple, that Mr. Williams' music is awful. Nobody should listen to his music ever. Mr. Williams responds by saying, we can do an album together if you want. Stop this. The man continues of how he's sleeping with Mr. Williams' significant other, and then Mr. Williams responds by saying, I would have killed you except for what you do. That is the context that they don't tell you about. And Mr. Williams did nothing to Mr. Bennett. In fact, the evidence would have shown if we had time or we would have gone forward, that Mr. Bennett and Mr. Williams are on the red carpet receiving awards in California, sitting right next to each other and taking photographs. This is not the Jeffrey Williams is a known person who is all over the place. If he did something, somebody wanted him, they can find him. This is not good. He's not hanging out on Cleveland Avenue. What the state is saying are not true.
True that. He is not on Cleveland
so he's in a Fulton County jail,
anymore.
and he's housed. And there are crazy, sick, violent people. And they're on the phone. And Mr. Myrick, NYRIC, is calling other people supposed co-conspirators. How much will Jeffrey Williams give? He doesn't say that, but that's the theme of it, as well as Christian Eppinger. What the state doesn't tell you is that when Mr. Sumlin is asked, hey, find out how much Thug will pay me to kill Mr. YFN Lucci, Mr. Sumlin says, I don't know his number. I can't get in touch with him. He didn't talk to me. And that's because, Your Honor, since 2015, and he means no insult, but Jeffrey Williams has had zero contact.
I'm sorry. Contact him so he could do something for me that's gang related, but I'm in the gang, I don't have the leader's phone number. Oh, okay. Like, I have employees that are in like different countries and they still have my phone number, okay? Like, what? This case is so bad. It'll be interesting to see if Shannon and Yak come to a plea, or how long we will continue. If Shannon and Yak are going to be able to use the experts that Doug was going to use. But I laugh all the time at this case because I don't know who this prosecution thinks they were, or like what kind of mystery they think they solved, but they did a bang-up job.
With Shannon Stillwell, until this case, Kenneth Copeland, Demekian Garlington, Justin Cobb, Demise McMullen, Mr. Sledge, Mr. Murphy, all these people, this is a lie. This is a 100% lie, and that's why we tendered a NOLO plea to being a leader of a criminal street gang. Mr. Williams is not a leader. In fact, if we don't go forward, on Mr. Huey's phone, there are conversations with Mr. Copeland. And they both say how Jeffrey Williams is a zero, and F him. And they don't talk to him, and Jeffrey Williams never does anything for them. Mr. Huey and Mr. Williams met later. He met him closer in the time of 2020. Mr. Huey's father went through a horrible episode that Mr. Williams knew, and that's how Mr. Williams knew his son, who's Mr. Huey. And Mr. Huey's on hard times, and Mr. Huey's making mistakes. And Mr. Huey, supposedly, Mr. Williams believes, armed robbed a man named Chandler Durham, D-U-R-H-A-M. Mr. Durham is Mr. Williams, he's a fabulous record engineer. And Mr. Williams states, tell him to give back the property or he's going to die. The state puts that as an overt act. No one dies. The property doesn't get returned. Mr. Huey ignores Mr. Williams. The state told you today that Jeffrey Williams sent...
Do you know how many times I have threatened, like, really, let's start with my children. Do this or you're going to die. Do you know how many times people have actually died as a result? Ash Bay, thank you for the compliment about my life. I agree. Free the jury. At this point, I feel like the jury is being held hostage. Okay, like at this point, the jury could sue the government for this wrongful detention. It's ridiculous.
Mr. Huey posting that Mr. YFN Lucci is going to be performing on January 19, 2020. That's not true. Mr. Huey sent that to whoever phone that was, and all it says is slat and slatty. Well, I went out to the places that Mr. Bennett was supposed to perform. There's no shooting. There was no fight. There was nothing to report. There's nothing here. In addition, the state said the same thing on September 12th, September 2nd, 2022 on Mr. Huey's phone. I'm not conceding that was Jeffrey Williams even having a conversation with him, but even if it was, it doesn't show anything. It says slatty, lay low. Lay low means don't do anything. Get out of the way. That is what it is.
Yeah,
that is Mr. Williams' role. Mr. Williams, there is evidence in the record, and it would have been more. He takes people on tour with him. He takes people in the mall with him. But when they do crime or do things to people, for instance, there was a prostitute, and several people gave that prostitute money, $500. And the prostitute, at the end of the $500, getting $500 from several people, had sex with a person, and then she was armed robbed. So all the money came back. Mr. Williams wasn't involved in that, but he heard about it. He made those people find the prostitute and repaid her every dime. People
That's
stole
nice.
from stores that Mr. Williams found about. He went to the stores and he repaid all that. He didn't steal anything. He doesn't need to steal anything. Your Honor, Mr. Williams stands with Elton John. Elton John called Mr. Williams the next coming of John Lennon. Mr. Williams is unbelievable talent. He's not just a rap artist. In fact, when he's interviewed in 2017, he gives a statement and he says, I had to learn rap. He grew up in a house learning other forms of music. He liked all music. But rap hit in his community, and his community raised him. They supported him. They came out to him. They made him get into establishments. And once the establishment saw all the people come out, he got more establishments. And then he went out of that little area in Atlanta to other parts of Georgia and then to all the neighboring states and throughout our country. And he has performed on every continent but one.
And look
He
at
has performed in
Whitaker.
front of-
She is really listening. Like, she has been listening intently to everything Steele is saying. Look at her.
being the headliner, 300,000 people at one time. He has a real life and career. He is not the leader, and he is not worried about buying jewelry that is stolen. Mr. Williams is actually innocent. I'm not trying to corrupt our plea. That's his plea, and he's entitled to it, and he wants it, and he embraces it. But to me, this is a wrongful prosecution. This is outrageous.
All right, so you're pleading guilty, or your client is pleading guilty to counts 57 through 62.
It's all true.
Do you
Yes,
concede there's a factual basis
I
for
can
those
see.
counts?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay. All right, I mean to interrupt you.
No, it's fine. And Your Honor, I'll answer any of your questions. But the point I'm trying to make is 45 years to serve 25 years in prison when just this morning it was a probationary offer. It was a probationary offer. The state knows, but they want to control. They have this theory of music, and they want to stop Mr. Williams from making music, from entertaining, to stop his life. That's just not right. And it's wrong of the district attorney in Fulton County to do that. If they offer probation, then he's not a 45 to serve 25 years in custody type of person, and he's certainly not the person that the state has stated in front of the court. What we're asking, Your Honor, on count one, which is the RICO count, to accept the no low contendere plea, please sentence Mr. Williams to 20 years to serve 5 years in prison, community time served. Mr. Williams has served, as I said, 22.5 years. On count 56, Your Honor, that's the leadership of a gang, NOLA plea, 20 years to serve 5 years, community time served, consecutive to all other counts. On count 57, which is a gang count, Your Honor, not a leader, guilty plea, 20 years to serve 5 years, community time served, concurrent with count 1. With regard to count 58, which is possession of, I
It
believe
looks
is,
like Jeff is praying.
marijuana with intent to distribute,
Please,
10-year
Judge.
sentence on probation, concurrent with count 1. On count 59, which is violation of Georgia Controlled Substance Act, possession of codeine with intent to distribute, 5 years on probation, concurrent with count 1. On count 59, Your Honor, which is violation of Georgia Controlled Substance Act, possession of cocaine, 3 years on probation, concurrent with count 1. Count 61, 5 years of probation. It's a firearm count, consecutive to the other counts, consecutive to before count 56. And then count 62, 10 years to serve community time served. That should be a total sentence, Your Honor, that we are respectfully requesting the court to consider. I believe it's 45 years to serve 5 years in prison, community time served, 40 years on probation, credit for the time already served in community time served. As I said, after 3 years of probation, the probation becomes non-reporting, and after successful completion of 10 years on probation, the balance of the sentence be terminated. Mr. Williams asked the court for house arrest for 3 years as part of the sentence, but house arrest specifically defined that Mr. Williams will be in his home or at any lawful employment, touring, studio, performance, business meetings, and the like. Wear an ankle monitor for the first year and pay the costs of same, and the company must be approved by probation department, and the ankle monitor to be fixed within 10 days of hopeful release from custody.
Okay.
Mr. Williams cannot possess a firearm, but he can be around licensed security who are armed or other persons who are lawfully carrying a firearm with a license. And that would be knowingly for Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams can transfer probation outside the state of Georgia. He has residences in the state of California. He has studios in the state of California. Mr. Williams be allowed to travel throughout our country and the world for lawful work-related industries. Mr. Williams wants to perform. He's going to do this anyway, Your Honor, but we made part of the sentence. At least one concert each year at a venue, if they'll have him holding 10,000 people, if that is workable for the venue, and Mr. Williams' management, and he's going to donate all of the profits that he makes to a 501c3 charity. Mr. Williams wants to pledge $100,000 for the next 3 years to the Fulton County Sheriff's Office if they will hold an illegal firearm buyback, to buy back firearms that are not supposed to be on our streets. Mr. Williams does not wish to go near the Cleveland Avenue area, not to insult that area at all, but it is just not a good idea under this circumstance. And he can drive on the highway, but otherwise not come within 1 mile of the area that we call Cleveland Avenue, and we can give the exact dimensions of that area. Mr. Williams must perform 100 hours of community service per year for the next 3 years as designated by probation department. Mr. Williams can associate, and this was agreed to previously, with people who are convicted felon or alleged gang members solely for lawful purpose of making music.
I see Ms. Love shaking her head, and I think it's fair to establish that until the entirety of the negotiations were agreed to, it was all up in the air.
Correct.
That may have been something y'all had already hammered out, but it's not anything they're bound to.
Absolutely.
Fair. Okay.
I agree with that. Mr. Williams can have no contact with any of the supposed victims, and there was an Exhibit A
course, Ms.
attached to
Love
the
was
state's
shaking her head.
proposed plea agreement, negotiated plea agreement that was sent to you, so we adopt that Exhibit A, but we can give it to the court if you need those names. And Mr. Williams have no contact with any of the co-defendants in this indictment, with the exception of Mr. Quamar Greer, that is his biological brother, as well as Mr. Sergio Kitchens. He's a phenomenal artist. He goes performer known as Gunna, G-U-N-N-A. Mr. Williams and Mr. Kitchens are
Always with
contractually
the
obligated, and
phenomenal.
they frequently perform music together. Your Honor, any other conditions that this honorable court deems appropriate? I want to thank the court for all your time. Always, I want to thank Ms. Percival for everything she's done. I want to thank Mr. Williams for allowing me to stand with him. And I really never thought we would be here, but this is his decision. I want to thank the Honorable Keith Adams, who may want to speak, Your Honor, but I can never imagine a better lawyer than Keith Adams.
Mr. Adams, do you want to add anything to the record?
He's so sweet.
Your Honor, I don't know that there's really much that Mr. Steele has represented to the court. I think fully and thoroughly the breadth of our knowledge of the case, Mr. Williams' background. I think the court has not just heard it from Mr. Steele, but has had the opportunity to sit here and hear some of the evidence and kind of get a feel. You've had a chance also to observe Mr. Williams and then get a feel for him, his background, and so forth. You know, the only thing I can say about Mr. Williams that hasn't been said is that he comes from an area. You might have heard throughout the course of the trial that there was an album, a concert tour. We came from nothing. And that is true. Mr. Williams came from, you know, I hate to use the word abject poverty, but that really is the case. Came from an area where there was a significant amount of crime, where, as you've heard, he's had tragedy in his life and has observed tragedy in his life, and he has gone through a good bit. He has been involved in a lot, but he has raised himself up. He has done the best he could and has done phenomenally well, and is, I think, an inspiration to a lot of people from that community who look to him and see the success that he has gained and have been fully supportive of him. But he finds himself here. He's in front of you. He is tendering his plea because he accepts responsibility. You've heard everything Mr. Steele has to say. I can only ask that you follow what we have put before you. You also have, I believe, the paperwork that was given to you by the state, which kind of gives you some idea of what they were looking for as well in terms of conditions on Mr. Williams, if we were to have reached some sort of agreement. And we ask that if you feel that there's anything within the state's proposal that might be appropriate in terms of sentence for Mr. Williams, that the court please feel free to do that. There's nothing that he is. He put himself before the court. And I think 2.5 years sitting, going through this process, challenging process, but now standing before you and asking that you consider everything and sentence him appropriately in the way that we requested. I'd simply ask you, I join Mr. Steele and Mr. Williams in asking you to do the same. And I thank you as well, as Mr. Steele did, for your patience with us and for bringing some order to the proceedings that candidly was needed. But that's all I have to say. I thank you again, and I ask you to consider everything that's been put before you.
All right, Mr. Williams, is there anything that you want to say?
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, I thought this was very good. Okay, I thought this was very good. And think about how he speaks versus like Huey and the other Quay.
I take full responsibility for, you know, my crimes or my charges. I want to say sorry to my family, my mom. My mom got 11 kids. I can't say all their names, you know. My managers, my kids that's not here. Really, everybody that got something to do with this situation, I want to say sorry for just, like, you know, having so much time investing into this, you know. And, I am a smart guy. I am a good guy, and I really got a good heart, you know. I find myself in a lot of stuff because I was just nice or cool, you know, and I understand that you can't be that way when you reach a certain height because it could end bad, and it don't really have to have anything to do with you, but it could end bad, and it could, you know, fall on you. And I know the choice is yours, is up to you. It's bad, and it could, you know, fall on you. And I know the choice is yours, is up to you. And I hope that you allow me to go home today and just trust in me to just do the right thing and never see you again unless it's at a, you know, bar in the future or something. Just out of this type of situation, I promise you I won't ever be in this type of situation again. I'm going away. I've learned from my mistakes. You know, I come from nothing and I made something and I didn't take full advantage of it. I'm sorry. Through these last 2.5 years of my life, you are really, truly, honestly, the best thing that has happened to me because you made everything fair for me and everybody involved on both sides, you know. I'm sorry
That
to
is
share, you know,
nuts.
everybody for just having to put extra time.
That is nuts. I'm so thankful to you because you made it so I could have a fair trial. You're guaranteed a fair trial in this country. It shouldn't be up, like every judge should be giving you a fair trial. It's crazy.
Because you made everything fair for me and everybody involved on both sides, you know. I'm sorry to the sheriff, you know, everybody for just having to put extra time in. I know y'all got paid more money, but I'm sorry for y'all having to put this extra time in to be away from y'all family, you know, and I just hope that you find it in your heart to allow me to go home and be with my family and just do better as a person. I know what I bring to the table. I know what I am. I know the heights I've reached. I know the impact I got on people, period, in the community, you know, all people. I learned that late, like these past 2 or 3 years of my life, I kind of learned that late. And maybe it was because I was, you know, probably on drugs or anything, I don't know. But I have came to my senses and I understand what I mean to this world. But I am a good guy, you know, I don't mind doing stuff like, you know, like free shows, and I always did that. You know, I did free shows and gave it to single parents, millions of dollars. You know, I made $1.8 million on a free show, and I gave it all to single parent charity. And I did like 2 or 3 shows that made like $700,000 a piece, and I gave it to the breast cancer organization. Like, you know, I do things. I put millions of dollars back into my community for real. I really did.
Wonderful.
I did more than anybody ever did from my side, you know. But I understand, you know, rap lyrics. I understand how it could be twisted. I understand what it could do to the mind of people. I understand all that, and I promise you I'm 100% changing that. You know, it's just, I'm older, I'm grown now, you know, and it's just like, I'm smarter, there's more things to rap about.
I really feel like this case is like children versus adult, right? Like, you're being charged for the crimes that you committed when you were a child and you were young and dumb. But now you're a grown-up, you don't really do stuff like that. Like, is that really how we want our system to be? I don't think so.
About, like, I've experienced a lot of good things. I experienced more bad things, but I experienced a lot of good things too. And anyway, I can go further.
Well, I appreciate it. And I appreciate that you do realize how much of an impact you have on people. I mean, it's past your neighborhood. It's worldwide, especially young people. And having come up from where you came up from and living in and around that, you know that gangs are damaging to our community. And it may be that a whole lot of rap music and the rap industry is, I mean, honestly, it sounds like a modern day version of kind of WWE wrestling that used to be on television, where people would just get up and posture and act like they hated each other. And it may be that that's a lot of what is going on in the music industry with rap.
Okay, so that is like the most middle-aged white lady shit I've ever heard. But the reason I know it's middle-aged white lady shit is because I said the same thing. I'm like, isn't all this shit fake? Like, isn't this just like wrestling where you have like a character and your character is this? And like, surely he's not wearing skirts and tight pants at home. Surely he's wearing like sweats and regular clothes like the rest of us, right? Like, I'm pretty confident that that is a character. Like, the way you guys see me, you see this version of me, but you don't see like sweatpants at home, Lauren, right? Like, you don't, that piece of who I am is reserved for just a few people. And for him, like, his rap persona person, I don't know. So I'm with Paige on this. This is some serious middle-aged white lady opinion. But that's how it looks. She's right.
But whether it is fake or not, it has tremendous impact on kids and young people who think, this is cool, this is what I want to do. Look at him, he's a millionaire. I can do that by being, you know, a gangster in the streets. And that's not true. What you're likely to have happen to you if you're a gangster in the streets is you get shot, you get killed, or you get thrown in prison. And those are, you know, by far the most likely outcomes. And, you know, you've been in here watching the trial, and you've seen the pictures of Mr. Ryan posing with a gun as big as he is at 15 years old and going out and shooting and killing another teenager. And that's what gangs do, and that's unfortunately a lot of what rap music does. And if you are a modern day John Lennon, you know, I mean, he might have rapped too in this day and age, I don't know, but I know you're talented, and even if you choose to continue to rap, you need to try to use your influence to let kids know that that is not the way to go, and that there are ways out of poverty besides hooking up with the powerful guy at the end of the street selling drugs. And, you know, I know that happens for protection sometimes, but a much better way would be...
I mean, I'm with Whitaker on this. Like, I feel so much the way she does. And the way she said, you know, don't just hook up with the guy who sells drugs. But then she's like, I know it's for protection sometimes. A lot of these are very complex issues, right? Like, this is why AI is never going to be able to take over the law. When you're a judge, you have to think about all of these elements. Like, does this person know better? Does this occur? Does that? And so she in what she just said, remind me of myself. I'm very similar. I'll be like, well, this, but then again, there is this, but then there's this, you know, so on and so forth. So.
be getting an education and setting, hanging around with people who set a good example. And you be one of those people that sets a good example. I mean, all right, so that's my high horse on that. I could also go on. But I want you to try to be more of the solution and less of the problem. All right? All right, so it is not lost on the court that the state, had they been able to come to agreement on certain special conditions, was willing to entirely dismiss the RICO count, was willing to entirely dismiss one of the gang counts, and was willing to entirely dismiss this, machine gun count, was willing to give a sentence that permitted Mr. Williams to walk out of the door today, and therefore does not seem to be particularly worried that Mr. Williams, if on the streets, would be a danger to society. I'm taking that into consideration in crafting my sentence. And in permitting a nolo plea to the RICO count in one of the two gang counts, I would not be permitting the nolo to the one if you were not pleading guilty to at least one of them. But you are, and y'all admit a factual basis for the counts that you are pleading guilty to. I find there to be a factual basis for those counts and for the remaining counts with which you are charged. I'm going to impose a sentence, and I've taken a little bit of the suggested special conditions from the defense and a little bit of the special conditions suggested by the prosecution. On count one, the court sentence is 20 years to serve 5 years, commuted to time served, the balance of 15 years to be probated, and a $25,000 fine. On count two, the sentence is 5 years to serve, commuted to time served. That's the minimum sentence that's permitted on that count. It is required to be run consecutively. I'm going to run it consecutive to count one, but I'm going to backload. Oh, I'm sorry, that is not commuted. That is 5 years to serve, and it's going to be run consecutively to count one, backloaded, by which I mean after you serve your 15 years of probation. If you have been successful on that probation, and I sincerely hope that you are, then at the end of that 15 years, I will commute the entire rest of any service portion of your sentence to time served. So I'll get to the end of it and give you the total sentence, but I'm also going to impose a $15,000 fine with regard to that count. Count 57, 20 years to serve 5, commuted to...
Paige going to get that money. Paige going to earn that income for the county of Fulton, y'all. You're going to pay that fine, bro. That's my salary.
Time served, the balance of 15 years probated, concurrent with count one. Count 58, 10 years to serve 5, commuted to time served, balance probated, concurrent with count one. 59, 5 years to serve, commuted to time served, concurrent with count one. 60, 5 years to serve, commuted to time served, concurrent with count one. Count 61, 5 years to serve, that is required to be also a consecutive sentence, so that's going to be run consecutively to count 56 and backloaded. Count 62, 10 years to serve, also required to be served consecutively, that's going to be consecutive to count 61, also backloaded. So essentially, the total sentence is 40 years to serve the first 5 years in prison, but commuted to the time that you have already served, followed by 15 years on probation, followed then by the backloaded 20 years, which can be served in custody and will be served in custody if you are not successful on your probation. If you are successful in completing your 15 years probation, that will be commuted to time served.
Okay. Happy birthday, Grateful. Happy birthday. It does look like Love's hair has begun to thin severely, and I'm imagining that's probably stress and hormones. All right, so Thug walks out a free man. Kind of. He's on probation for 15 years. 7 of those he has to do reporting in. He has to go 4 times a year to Atlanta to teach kids not to join gangs, but he is otherwise banished from Atlanta. So if he has to go to a funeral, a wedding, some kind of special event, some kind of medical illness, whatever, he can go to Atlanta. He is otherwise banished. Thou art banished. That is crazy. I think the property assets, Brownie, are going to be litigated in the civil litigation. I think that's just off. Wow, I got 2 birthdays today. Happy birthday, ladies. Happy birthday. And happy November, everyone. So I'm pretty sure the property will be returned through those civil lawsuits. They'll go through the civil forfeiture. So he's not getting it back. It's going to be a long time before anyone gets their stuff back. Yes, Jesus, he has been banished. He is banned from Atlanta except 4 times a year when he's demanded to come tell children not to join gangs. And when he has an issue, his mother gets sick, something like that, okay? I do believe that he is going to move permanently to his residence in California because I believe since marijuana is legal in California, he'll still be able to smoke it even though he's on probation. I too would leave. Georgia. Y'all can't own a damn machine. I mean, they can't own machine guns in California. California is pretty shitty in its own way. Just not as old, I guess, as Georgia. Okay, so let's see. I did not see this part because I was like, holy shit, I was freaking out. Plus, yesterday was Halloween. I was out with the kiddo trick-or-treating. What I was thinking about, though, is like Thug's kids were probably out trick-or-treating, and then they got home and their dad was there. And I bet that was so cool. Like, it makes me emotional just to think about the idea of, like, the children being reunited with their parent. Christian, I agree. Civil forfeiture is such a crock of shit. It's ridiculous. It's the most unconstitutional. Ugh. All right, here we go.
Marijuana, which carries a sentence of 1 to 10 years. As to count 59, I believe that's a possession of codeine with the intent to distribute, which is 5 to 30 years. And count 59, which is the possession of cocaine, which is
60 is possession of cocaine.
So 59 was the codeine, 60 is the possession of cocaine, which was 1 to 5 years. Possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, which was count 61, which is 5 years to serve consecutive to any count indictment. Possession of a machine gun, which was count 62, which was 10 years to serve consecutive. And then he was charged with count 63, which is possession of a firearm by convicted felon pursuant to 1611-133. I know my math isn't the best, but that's life plus some years. The state's recommendation, Your Honor, was for Mr. Kendrick to plead to count 1, conspiracy to violate the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, which was 20 to serve 15. Count 2, the murder reduced to voluntary manslaughter, 20 years to serve 15. And then to the gang count 57, also 20 years to serve 15. Also run concurrent, and the state was willing to null pros all the other counts in the indictment.
All right, and Mr. Kendrick and the attorneys associated with you, I want to make sure that y'all know that unlike what happened with Mr. Williams, if you plead non-negotiated to less than all of the charges, there is nothing that the court can do if the state chooses to go forward with some of those charges. So you could not do what Mr. Williams pled guilty or nolo to each of the charges that he was facing. You cannot say, well, I'd like to plead guilty to count 1 and I'd like to plead to the reduced charge on count 2, and then I'd like to just skip the rest of them, because the state can say, well, we're not skipping the rest of them, we're still going to try you for the rest of them. And the state can also say, we're not okay with letting you plead to voluntary manslaughter unless you abide by the terms of the agreement. We're going to go forward with the murder trial. So I know that Mr. Weinstein, you and Mr. Apt and everybody else who's been helping know that, but because things seem to have worked out sort of beneficially for some of these other people who have already pled, y'all might think, oh, well, gosh, can't we do something better than that? Given what you're facing, they hold a lot of the cards, and a lot of it is outside of the ability of this court to change, okay? All right.
We understand that, Your Honor. Thank you for advising us.
All right, Mr. Stillwell is facing...
Your Honor, Mr. Stillwell is also looking at count 1, which is the conspiracy to violate the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, which is 5 to 20 years. He is facing 2 counts of murder for count 2 and count 49, which each carries a sentence of life imprisonment. He's also charged with count 50 of this indictment, Your Honor, which is participation in criminal street gang activity, which carries a sentence of 5 to 20 years. He's also charged with count 51, participation in criminal street gang activity, also a sentence of 5 to 20 years. Count 52, possession of a firearm by convicted felon, previously convicted under 1611-133, which is 15 years consecutive to any count in the indictment. 54, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, which is 5 years to serve consecutive. Count 64, which is another possession of a firearm by convicted felon under 1611-133, which is also 15 years to serve consecutive. So Mr. Stillwell's looking at maximum of 2 life sentences plus
85 years.
Plus 85 years, Your Honor. The state's recommendation, and I'll just say globally, Your Honor, was 60 years to serve 40 years in prison, that we would have reduced both of the murders to voluntary manslaughter, Your Honor, and we had given his attorney the option to kind of craft how that 40 years would look, but that was the extent to our negotiations, Your Honor.
And Mr. Stillwell, kind of the same information to you. If the state does not want to reduce charges, you're not entitled to plead to reduce charges. They can say, you got to face these murder charges and we're going to make it a jury trial if you don't agree to what we're offering. Same thing, you can't say, well, I'd like those other charges dismissed if they're not willing to dismiss them in exchange for the negotiated sentence. So obviously each of you has the right to continue with the trial. What you're doing, you are all have very capable attorneys representing you, who clearly care very passionately about you all personally, as well as presenting your best case. But it's ultimately going to be up to the jury, and you cannot know what any jury is going to do. And they may say, I don't believe a single bit of this beyond a reasonable doubt. Y'all are both welcome. They may say, you know what, I buy this, I don't buy that. I'm convicting you of 4 of the 5 or 4 of the 8 charges. You're still then going to face sentencing. They may convict you of everything. And if you are convicted of everything, Mr. Stillwell, you're facing 2 life sentences plus 85 years on top of that, as opposed to 40 years to serve with parole as a possibility.
That's a lot.
And Mr. Kendrick, you are facing life plus, I think I added up 115 years instead
Shit.
of 20 to serve 15. So it's just something to think about. And I mean, it's already past 5 o'clock. So are y'all going to leave the offer up until you have withdrawn the offer before you even put it on the record to?
We communicated this to them last night, and they did not accept it. They had withdrawn off.
All right, well, given that the state spent the entire day negotiating Mr. Williams' plea, ultimately unsuccessfully, I don't know if either Mr. Weinstein or Mr. Sharp would have been able to negotiate with you during today.
They would have. No one would have any communication from Mr. Weinstein or Mr. And they rejected the offer.
Okay.
I did have communication with Mr. Abate today. I attempted to have communications with the DA last Tuesday
Well,
morning, but she
they're
failed to show up for our
already
meeting.
Any chance y'all might leave it open until 9 o'clock tomorrow?
Your Honor, I can settle with the DA, and if she wishes to read it.
Okay. I mean, I have no idea whether they want to keep it, but I haven't, we haven't put it on the record, and I haven't ensured myself as the court that they understood what the potential sentences were up until just now. So I would appreciate it if she would, so that they have the opportunity, having heard from the court, to talk to their attorneys. And they may still say, no, we're good, we're going forward, but.
We'll consult with the district attorney, but as a
Okay. So in the event that it is no longer open to you or that you decide to reject it anyway, I plan to start the trial again Monday morning. I'm going to have the jury be here at 9. I'm going to have us be here at 8:30. We're back to getting no sleep. So I'll see y'all at 8:30 regardless. Okay, now court is adjourned.
Okay. Oof. All right, so I think Jesus is in our chat. We have real life Jesus in the chat today. Jesus, welcome to the chat. Welcome to the stream. Very special Jesus joined us today, so that's exciting. All right, I have already stated, but I'm going to repeat myself because I love y'all, that I am still following this case. I did not begin following this case because of Thug or his music. And in fact, as I've seen his music as the case goes on, I don't like it. I don't like his music. I don't care for it at all. I think Thug is going to move to California damn near immediately. I think he probably had the best night of sleep he's had in years, decades maybe, last night. I do believe, Alda, there will still be cameras in the courtroom. I'm not sure that everyone's going to be as excited about watching it as they were. I certainly am, because this is an interesting and gross miscarriage of justice, and I like watching train wrecks happen in front of my eyes. So every Friday, I will still be recapping this until it is done, okay? Until Shannon and Yak have pled out, or until the jury, decides whether or not Shannon and Yak are guilty. One thing that will be interesting is to see, what the judge says on Monday to the jury about all of the other defendants being gone. 10 people just not there. 6 people not there. It's crazy. So that will be really interesting to watch. I'm looking forward to that. I really am. I think that Thug will move promptly to California. I think he'll register there. I think he'll be much happier there anyhow. Personally, I think if you live in the ATL area or anywhere near Fulton County, you should move. They obviously do not care about the Constitution or your rights. I did a recent poll on where I should go do my next meet and greet. I guess it will depend on the next on the coming up trials that I'm following. I'm watching Diddy, of course, what we can see. They're not going to have live courtroom footage because it's federal, but I'm following Diddy. I'm following everything there. I had followed Sarah Boone. I will watch her sentencing on December 2nd, so I'll complete that cycle. There is an interesting murder case right now that's been, they just did closing arguments outside of Atlanta. It's this older lady who allegedly killed her 300-pound, 5'4" husband in a basement, then dragged his deceased and quite heavy body up the stairs, then put him in a golf cart, then drove him out to a fire pit, threw him in a fire pit. Turns out all of the kids hate her, all of her children hate her, but they also all owe the dad a lot of money and need money, so it's very interesting. It looks like they framed her. I will not get a Rule 22, but thank you. Oh, Justin, you can stream for me. You can go in there and stream. My email is in the description. Send me an email if you're interested. Okay, so I will be back next Friday to recap this same trial. I'm sticking with this trial, y'all. We're carrying this trial until Yak and Shannon are done, all right? Plus, Max and Weinstein have been two of the best lawyers to watch, so that's going to just really be plenty. I will have a new trial to start watching during the week, so keep an eye out for that. Make sure that y'all are hitting like, make sure you're subscribing. We did reach our goal of 10,000 subscribers. I'm so excited. Thank you so much. Thank you for all your support always. I appreciate everyone that's joined us here on the live stream and in general. And I will see everyone here. Hopefully all of y'all will continue to have interest in this trial because it is interesting, and we do want to make sure that we as the public are keeping an eye on these things, and we as the public are auditing our government to make sure our government's doing what they should do. Also, as a reminder to everyone, I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but do vote on Tuesday. I will remind you that the president and federal issues have a far, far less impact on your life than your local issues, your judges, your city council members, local things. So make sure you pay close attention to the local issues and make sure you get out and vote. They are apparently, K-Way, they are able to file an appeal of the plea, but how are you going to apply? I mean, they can, because it was blind, probably, appeal that aspect, but you really can't appeal it because he said yes, sworn in court. So it's kind of like not really an appeal. All right. It's not an appeal in the sense that we think of them. Thank you everyone for joining me, and I will see you again next week.